think we're still getting Eileen set up. Okay, great. All righty. I am going to call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Chico Unified School District Board of Trustees for October 21st, 2020. If you would, please stand and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a very full agenda tonight, and we're going to try to work our way through it. I would appreciate if everybody would take a moment now and turn off your cell phones so they're not going off in the middle of the meeting and becoming a distraction. Okay, so we had a closed session prior to starting this meeting. However, there is not anything that I need to report out. Right now, we're going to have announcements. Dr. Kaiser.
So I am an official election worker, and I just wanted to update everyone. If you are 17, but you will turn 18 on November the 3rd, you are legally able to vote, and that would be thrilling to see you there. We have several voter assistance centers around Chico, and the BMU on Chico State campus will be one of them. It will actually hold 2 voting centers in the same thing, and we are encouraging everybody to wear a mask. We will provide masks if you don't have them, but we are also going to have face shields if someone has a physical reason why they can't wear a face shield. But that's not a barrier to voting. In other words, you will have the right to vote. We are prepared to help people register on the spot that day, and we are open from 9 to 5 starting Halloween, and then on the actual election day, the 3rd, we will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So I encourage everyone to come and vote. You can put your ballot signed in the ballot box outside. There are drop boxes around the city, and you can also come inside. And if you need assistance, we will have voter assistance specialists. That's what I usually do, helping you with the machine. So please come and exercise your participation in our democracy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Before we move on to our items from the floor, I wanted to mention once again what our process, what the procedure is going to be. For people who have sent in a speaker card or have signed up to be a speaker, what we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth between people who may be here in person wanting to speak and those who will be telephoning in. And if we do not have, and it appears to me we do not have a number of people who have phoned in, or one on the speaker card who is going to be addressing us on phone. Okay, and I am not really seeing if anyone is going to be addressing us from actually here in the building, but should there be anybody, yes? Okay, when that item comes up, we will have the person who came to the meeting, and then we'll have the people who are on the phone. And then if there will be an opportunity for other people to indicate they do want to speak, right, who are just viewing it, and we can take them time allowing, correct? Okay, so we have a whole procedure in place, Erica and John, you're going to be working together, and we're going to be, all right, having the people here. So with that said, items from the floor is for the people who want to bring up something that is not on our current agenda. It has to be an item that is not on our current agenda. So I'm going to ask. Pardon? I don't need to. Okay. Anyhow, if there are any items from the floor, we will take those right now. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone who has contacted Erica, and so it appears that we will not have any items from the floor. Then we will move on to negotiations update for Mr. Hanlon.
Yeah, so as I reported last time, we reached agreement with CTA. We will be meeting with them tomorrow to do some cleanup language on some of the details of the MOU, but we expect some productive negotiations there. They're typically small items. We got all the big stuff hammered out when we signed the agreement, but we have a couple details we want to revisit. With regards to CSEA, we signed an agreement today with CSEA. They will be bringing that forward to their members for a vote, and then also taking that through their 610 process through Sacramento. As I had said before, in the meantime, we are operating on the previous MOU, and there are some significant things that CSEA has asked for and some significant things that we need, and both of those make it work so we can operate with school open. So most of the CSEA folks were already back at work, so it wasn't the same kinds of issues that we had with teachers that we had to get ironed out. So tomorrow with CUTA. I know we have presidents of both unions. I don't know if they want to add anything to that.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Moretti.
Well, for the first time, I think in 2 years, I have something to add to Jim's report. In addition to fixing what we might have gotten wrong in the first MOU, we also want to start looking at what the next step looks like. So if we can get everything fixed, and I'm not saying we will, all the small items, we need to start looking at the next phase and what that MOU might look like. So just one addition to Jim's comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moretti. And is there another representative from CSEA who wanted to say anything?
Yes, Lori Sullivan's here. Thank you for letting me speak. And I just want to second what Kevin and Jim said. Negotiations are going great. We have a nice cooperative team, and we will start working on the next phase.
Terrific. Thank you, Lori. Okay, we will then move on to our consent calendar, and I believe Eileen said you wanted to pull an item.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to pull under General, Item 2, donations to the district.
Okay, that item's pulled. Did anyone else want to pull an item from the consent calendar? Is there anyone in
Yes,
the...
I'd like to pull an item, please.
Sure, go ahead, Linda.
I'd like to pull 7.2.1, the enrollment update.
Oh, right, we've got those two items down. Anything else? Anybody in the audience wanted to pull anything? Okay, so do I have a motion for the remainder of the consent calendar?
I move the rest of the consent calendar with the exception of 7.1.2 and attendance data.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Kaiser, a second by Eileen Robinson. We will take a roll call vote as our first vote. Linda, how do you vote?
Hovey, aye.
Robinson?
Oh, Robinson, aye.
Kaiser?
Kaiser, aye.
Griffin, aye.
Lando, aye.
All righty, that passes unanimously. We'll go to the item Eileen pulled, which is 7.1.1.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. When I went through the donations list, I saw a a donation to Neil Dow Elementary for $10,000 from the Firm Family Church in care of Wilson. When I inquired, these are funds and gift certificates that they have donated as awards and incentives for the kids that are doing well with school. And it was such a significant contribution to the school site. I wanted to just give them a shout out and say thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to move that item then?
Thank you. I move approval of donations 1.2.
Yes, 7.1.2. So we have a motion by Eileen Robinson, a second by Dr. Kaiser. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Linda, your item is 7.2.1.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I actually want to bring this up and perhaps get some feedback from the fiscal team. When I took a look at the enrollment update, which I'm so grateful that we get, I noticed from October of last year to October of this year is a substantial drop in enrollment. I think it was somewhere around 445 students. What that does, I don't know the current exact dollar amount that we receive per student from the local control funding formula, but if I did some just flyover math, that looks like $3.5 million. And I'm bringing this up because it is of concern, because we will take a look at enrollment and of course attendance for this year when we do our budget for next year. And so we're looking at a potential loss of $3.5 million, and that's not even taking into account anything the governor might do in light of the crazy economic times as far as kind of taking a cut to the schools. So I wanted to reach out to the fiscal team and see if I'm off base or if this is something that they are watching as well.
Okay, Kevin will address that.
I really appreciate the question because obviously as we look at enrollment, it leads us to average daily attendance, which ultimately leads to the local control funding formula.
Exactly.
When the budget was passed, the legislation changed the prior year because remember, we get the better of the current year ADA or the prior year ADA.
Correct.
And the legislation noted that for the 21-22 year, the prior year ADA would actually be the 19-20 year. So that enrollment, as just a reminder, was 12,369 at CBEDS, which calculated to about 11,848 ADA. So that will become our new base. So we have the benefit, and charters do not. Charters don't get that same prior year. But we will have the benefit of that ADA as the better of. So if, for instance, we stayed at the current enrollment, and as Linda pointed out, it was millions of dollars of loss because of students not attending, we would still be guaranteed the 1920 is our average daily attendance that we'd use for funding. That then means that there certainly is a problem in the out year because then your new base becomes the current year, 2021. And as Linda also noted, we are concerned about what the 21-22 year budget will be in January from the governor because our current year budget was based on tax revenues that were received prior to COVID. So we are expecting a pretty severe reduction in revenue at this point in time in January from the governor's proposal. So we'll have a reprieve related to average daily attendance, but I think we're also going to see a loss in revenue related to either cuts or deficits in our local control funding formula.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that.
Right. Well, thank you. Yes, not really what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear I was totally off base, but thank you for clarifying. And so I just, again, wanted to bring that up, that we need to proceed with caution and, really navigate the year coming up and do the best we can. So with that, may I move 7.2.1?
Okay. All right, we have a motion by Linda Huffey. We have a second by Eileen Robinson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And so that passes, and that takes care of our consent calendar. Yes.
I have to apologize. I just got informed by one of our constituents that I didn't have my mic on, and so they didn't hear a thing I said. So I really
I heard-
apologize. Huh?
I heard you.
You did? Yeah. Oh, it was, because it was Julie said she couldn't hear anything. Well, if people heard me, then that's good. I don't have to repeat it.
Okay. If you want to, you could do it at the announcements at the end, too. You could repeat. Okay, so we're going to move on to our discussion action calendar. And first up, we have educational services, and this is an information-only update on the reopening of in-person instruction in the modified traditional AM/PM model.
Thank you. Yes, we're just going to kind of go over what it's looked like for the first 3 days of our AM/PM, our shift to AM/PM for you guys, to kind of give you a quick update on what that'll look like. Our agenda for this discussion item will be the number of students in each of our instructional models. So we want to kind of give you a look at how many students are attending our schools in the AM/PM model, how many have done the Oak Bridge model, and the other that has done, the third option was to do online distance learning on their campus. We'll kind of go over again what curriculum and instruction looks like in those models. We will do the health and wellness or social emotional learning, having our students come back to school after 7 months. We wanted to kind of share what we've been doing with that. Our safety and sanitation on our campuses when we brought them back. A lot of that you've heard, but we just want to go over again the update from that. And our communication and our technology update for our parents and for our students. So first we're going to have Mr. Karras kind of go over the data, which shows what the students and what model they have chosen.
Good evening. So at the request of the board, I'm reporting out to you the percentage and number of students that are choosing to take part in site-based online instruction and in-person instruction. So what we see is a little under 80% of Chico Unified students are back in school in the AM/PM model in person, and about a little over 20% chose to do the site-based online. I want to note that Oakdale, Oak Bridge, and Loma Vista are not included due to the different ways they take attendance. Oakdale and Oak Bridge are independent study, and Loma Vista has different policies due to programs there. Okay. Next. This slide I wanted to provide by site for your review. I'm not going to go over each site, but at the elementary level, we see anywhere from 90% of students in person at Shasta to just a little over 50 at Rosedale. So wide span in how the sites are coming back. At the secondary level, we see Chico Junior at 67 or 68% coming back in person. That's the lowest in secondary. And then we see on the other end Chico High with 87% of their students coming back. Next slide. Oak Bridge enrollment, as we've gone through this change, has stayed relatively static. We're only down 16 from right at that first week of school, and we currently sit at 535. Any questions on those? We'll take questions at the end.
Oh, you want questions at the end?
It's okay if you want to ask.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to
either way.
This is Eileen. Excuse me. I wanted to go back to the slide before this one. When you're talking about percentages, are you talking about the percentages in attendance of those that were expected? Do we have absences, or are the people that you're reporting, the students were the ones that were enrolled and expected to attend?
This data is showing what the students are scheduled into in Aries. So it has nothing, attendance doesn't come into play here.
Thank you. That was my
And
question.
it's just what they're signed up for.
Okay, we're going to have Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Shepherd kind of go over the different instructional models for us.
There we go. We're excited to be back in elementary. People have been very happy traveling to all the different schools and checking in with as many people as possible, and just generally a very comfortable, confident, happy return is kind of how I would sum it up. Certainly some little issues. The elementary world, we've come back in person, so we have a mix of teachers actually delivering instruction in person to kind of class sizes about 15 or below. Some of them. We have other teachers that are doing kind of in the AM, they're doing things in person, but PM, they're continuing Zooming also, potentially. And kind of the third way that some of them are doing things, some of them are actually kind of doing some live streaming while they're teaching. In the elementary world, they were incredibly flexible, trying to match up to what parents were looking for, what teachers wanted to do, so they kind of creatively put different models together. And like when you looked at the Rosedale data that Tim shared a little bit, they had a whole different need level with what families wanted to do as far as being there in person compared to a Shasta with it. So different teachers, different sites were very creative and really kind of put different strategies together so that I think as of this moment, everybody's been able to slot into whether online, AM, PM, something that's kind of matching up to what their family was looking for. So we've been happy to be back. And actually, Gina Rivera is here with us. She's a Chapman elementary teacher, first grade. And I asked Gina to share for a couple minutes, and I can walk through Gina's class today actually while she was live streaming in the PM with one group and had about 8 or 9 students there in person with her also at the same time. So Gina, you want to share for a minute?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ted. Hi, my name is Gina Rivera. I teach first grade at Chapman, as Ted said. I am doing the AM-PM model where my PM is that third option we were given of live stream or Zoom plus in person. Getting back was quite the transition. My grade level partner and I decided to keep Ready Math. We really liked that program. But being back in person, we loved Wonders for online, but wanted to go back to Treasures because that's our natural go-to, and we know it so well, and we love the way that flows too. Being back, there have been a lot of pros for us. For my class specifically, I haven't had a lot of issues with math. I actually haven't had any issues besides the, oh, honey, it needs to go over your nose, and they go ahead and go right for it. My sanitation has been great in my classroom thanks to our custodial and some M&O workers. It's been super clean. I felt really good, and I like that I get to clean. Because sometimes I like to clean a little more. It just helps me feel good. It helps with my anxiety of being back, and that has been really helpful for me. Our drop-off and pickup has gone really smoothly. My school is smaller, so it might not be the same for everybody, but my admin did a great job of coming up with a great model, and it has worked really well. For me as a teacher, having the 2 groups and having smaller numbers is actually a little bit of a silver lining for me, because I want to make up for those 7 months that kids haven't been in person, and being able to really focus on kids and have those spontaneous interactions that have been missed online. I've learned more about my kids in these last 3 days than I really had online, it's sad to say. And that's kind of the con for my kids who still are online. There are still some things that I'm missing for them. And I just can't necessarily do everything for them that I can with my in-person kiddos, but we are doing our best and we're still pushing through. And there is that feeling of being nervous of getting sick and bringing it back to people I love and for my kids too. But here we are, we're working hard, we're doing really great things, and it feels great to have our school come back to life, and it's been wonderful.
Thanks, Gina, for sharing. And I will chime in. Gina said they did a really good job with parking and pickup and things. They'd say that's the one growth area we have in the elementary schools. Several schools with reopening, we have a little traffic flow issue at a couple of them that the principals are definitely working on. Kathy?
So I'm glad you mentioned that. I have 2 at Emma Wilson and 2 step ones at Rosedale, and the first day the chaos was literally in the pickup. But certainly nothing but bright smiley faces from the kindergartner and the second graders. And by the second day, both schools had really ironed it out. It was so much more fluid and worked so great. So those are both different schools, as you said, and Emma Wilson's our second biggest one. So the fact that they could get it all figured out was really impressive.
Okay, from a secondary perspective, as you can see, these three models are relatively similar to elementary. And I do think it's important to highlight the inclusion of all of our students. That includes our special ed students, our English language learners, our targeted student populations. Those needs are being addressed. As we transition back, sometimes those targeted student populations are disproportionately affected by these changes. And so I know Diane and her team and Ritesh and his team have been doing everything they can to include these kids. I do want to invite Kyle Gunther. He's a middle school teacher here in the district. He comes from a Chico local educator family. You might recognize the last name. And Kyle's going to tell us a little bit about how his experience is. Kyle?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Shepard, and for having me tonight. I just want to start by saying I've been super impressed with all the teachers and staff and admin on campus, but most importantly, our students. Students in the classroom have done an amazing job of procedures and guidelines. And from what I see on campus, I couldn't be more proud of our Gators. I think the biggest challenge that I have come across so far is setting up the hybrid model in the last week and a half or so. Between working with my technology and figuring out how to best address my students in the classroom and prevent a distraction with the Zoom, making sure that the balance of working with my students in the classroom and on a Zoom is there. But I'm happy to say after today, day one of the hybrid model, I think it's gone really well, with the exception of a handful of hybrid students that have been juggled around, not being able to get the Zoom links and that, but I think with time we'll get on track with that. Another thing that I've noticed with students is over the time they've been back 3 days, the lack of questions that have come up from students. And I think this has come from the time distance learning, where there is an added responsibility of joining the teacher's offices voluntarily or emailing the teacher for help. So having them back in class where they're able to raise their hand, I think is going to be super helpful. I actually volunteered to bring some of my academic support students onto campus a couple weeks ago and work with them in the afternoons. And to help with those questions, I set up a little quarter sheet weekly check-in form that they'd get when they come in. And one of the prompts on it was, today I'm going to ask for help on. And I think it helped the students be able to think about what they've been working on before coming to school and come up with some questions to ask while they're here and get that extra support that they're here for. But now with day one, I think students were really hesitant. They weren't sure what to expect. They weren't sure what to do. But now on day 3, we jump back into our science curriculum today. And already I've seen many more students engaged in raising their hands, asking for help. It's really helped me be able to observe and figure out how I can help rather than wait for the email or them join office hours or having to track them down myself via email during distance learning. I've also seen much more participation in the classroom, responding to class discussions, opposed to when we were doing distance learning. Yesterday and the day before in science, I showed a little video about a science investigation and the importance of wearing masks and how they might prevent the spread of bacteria and virus. And afterwards, I had a student raise their hand and share just a very initial thought to all the evidence they saw. And they said, I think we should wear masks always if all that stuff comes out of our mouth when we talk or we speak. We yawn, we cough, whatever it was. And immediately the whole class turned around and looked back to them like, really? You want to keep wearing these masks? But to me, it showed that there was so much more engagement and everyone was involved, and it really led to a great scientific conversation, which was fantastic. Very cool.
Well, thank you, Kyle, for addressing the board. You're a relatively new teacher, and we appreciate your courage to join us this evening.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to go back to one of the challenges that Kyle expressed. I know the board is aware that we are still working with our sites to be sure that we can meet the needs of all the students and parents who are interested in the third option. So we are still in the process of addressing the many challenges that come with that choice. But as we're hearing, it's definitely been worth the work. We are hearing students truly feel like they're part of their school. So they can see kids, if they're working from home, they can see kids in the classroom, and they feel much more connected. So we're still working on those schedules.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Okay, next I'm going to have a couple principals speak on the health and wellness. First, we're going to have Ms. Joanne Betancourt talk about on the elementary level.
Good evening. It was so exciting to be back. This is just our third day today. And we had our counselors and counseling assistant ready to help kids that may need difficult or maybe having some difficulties with transitions. A lot of times those kindergartners have a hard time. We had done we had opened up the campus on Sunday so that parents could do a self-guided tour with their child so they could figure out how to get from their car and which gate they needed to go in to their classroom. And the students did really, really well. You know, there were just a handful of kiddos that we had to show to their classroom, especially those kindergartners and first graders. You know, it's a big campus and they're not quite sure where to go, but for the most part, it went really, really smoothly, more smooth than I could have ever imagined. So we were super excited about that. Lots of smiling faces, lots of parents excited, lots of kids excited. It really felt like that first day vibe where the kids and the campus is just hopping with, you know, just those positive smiles and vibes. So we were super happy. Everything went really, really well. And then our teachers are hitting the ground running. You know, they've already, literally on day one, I walked through a class, I had Mr. Karras with me, and teachers are already doing their assessments for their trimester assessments, trying to get ready to do those report cards, trying to figure out where those kids are so they can start implementing interventions. And at Rosedale, we're unique. You saw our percentages. But actually some of my teachers have opted, for example, my fourth grade team has opted to run the Zoom while they're teaching. And then in the afternoon, they've invited a small group of kids who they feel just need some one-on-one small group instruction. So they're getting their interventions in that way. So I thought that was a pretty creative way to, so those kids are Zooming in the morning, and then they're also coming back in the afternoon to get some interventions. So I thought that was pretty creative. So they're kind of getting a double dose there. So very proud of that. Leading up to getting back into campus, we had our PBIS team. We sat down and we, you know, figured out what protocols needed to be in place and what it was going to look like on our campus. And as Kathy alluded, there was some refining that needed to happen with the pickup, and we have one more round of revisions tomorrow. We're hoping that will fix it. But the difference between day one and day two was quite large, quite huge. But little by little, or as we say in Spanish, poco a poco, we're getting there. Some of the neighbors are not very pleased with the traffic at 10:30. They're just not used to that. I think they expected at 2:30 in the afternoon, not at 10:30 in the morning. Yeah, our PBIS team did a really good job creating a slideshow that the teachers then took and added some as they wanted to address for their own personal classrooms. And then I created a video and pushed it out to the whole community as well. So very excited, very happy to be back, and it feels good.
Yes,
Ms.
Kathy?
Kaiser?
Joanne, I think several of your teachers now know how loud a voice I have. So I was able to contact the kids that I needed to get a hold of. But one of the things that I was pleasantly surprised at was I went back to Emma Wilson to drop something off, and I was not aware they had a social emotional dog. And I was just so pleased with that because we did a experimental dog at Citrus, but I didn't know Emma Wilson had one. So
Yeah.
that was great.
I was not aware either.
I know. So that would be the next thing, Joanne.
Okay, we'll work on that.
Okay, next, we're going to have Mr. Armal come up. Is he here? He is in person. We have somebody in person at a board meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mall.
Anything I can do. Thank you for having me. I first want to start out by just expressing my sincere gratitude to my elementary and secondary colleagues for their efforts up to this date. I have the most wonderful wife at home who is also a fourth grade teacher here in Chico Unified School District, and to see what she goes through every day in prepping, just in general, but also what our elementary teachers have learned and set up for their students for their return, and also during distance learning. I'm in awe, and I'm very much humbled by all of their efforts. As far as my secondary colleagues, I cannot thank you enough for your collaboration, your communication, and your creativity as we work together to meet the needs of our students and our families. And so with that, I just want to share a little bit about what alternative education has been doing since the year began, since spring. So when we prepared to come back to campus, and then we realized we were going to be in distance learning back in to start the school year, the student support team really had to get creative and intensify our efforts in what I feel we already do very well, but also in how we're going to do it with students that are not on campus with us. So our targeted case managers did a phenomenal job of gathering truancy data from a distance learning perspective, and to this day we have made 78 home visits for non-engaged and partially engaged students. We have a team of administrators, targeted case managers, wellness counselors, and a Youth for Change representative. So we hit the road while our teachers are doing a great job of the daily interaction, communicating with students that were engaged, and also during an asynchronous time, reaching out to those who needed support and also those who were not engaged while they were busy doing that and giving everything they got, which I can't tell you enough about them and how proud of them I am. So to get out to those homes and to really do everything we can to get them connected, it was amazing. We had approximately 25 positive visits as well. We want to make sure we shared our students, our appreciation for their hard work. As you know, you've probably heard me say it many times, that I am privileged to work with the most resilient and courageous youth in our community, and to hear the stories and the barriers and the adversity that they go through that most of us will never experience, and still reach out and to trust, that courage that they have to trust us. And some of them never met us up to this point. So we have a lot of wonderful stories, but a lot of work to do, even with our students coming back on the campus. So some other things we did very well, in my opinion, we have truancy rosters on the Fairview side. So we're compiling our data as far as our return. It was a very smooth transition to reopening. I got some data that I could share with you on that, but we will start back up our truancy rosters. Every Fairview teacher will get a roster for their second period, and they will make connections, text, call, email, everything they can possibly do to get those students reconnected to us. Oakdale, they have their caseloads. They're constantly reaching out, everything they can do to keep those students reconnected from an independent study perspective. And of course, AFC, Cal staff, they are absolutely phenomenal. They take their first period students every single day, every single week, and they call and call and call until we get a response. And if we don't, then we get out there. Our student support team has come up with creative ways to connect with our students. We have a partnership with Promotores, and so we are getting counseling groups set up with them. They're actually starting this week. We had to modify a little bit with the AMPM model, so having Zoom counseling groups taking place, the opposite of the student schedule. So they created a wellness page that is something we've wanted to do for a long time, and the fact that they've been so creative underneath so much stress, it's humbling to say the least. So as far as reopening, again, it was a slow start. We had about 30% students that are actually signed up for in-person show up on Monday. Yesterday we doubled that to 66%, and I think that's a testament to what our students are capable of once they can cross one of those barriers and connect and trust our staff. Today, I don't have the data today, but from my direct observations, it looked pretty similar to what it was yesterday, and I'm confident we're going to get back up to the 80% mark that we typically around every year. Discussions with students and staff. Our students are absolutely amazing. They were a little nervous on Monday when they stepped back onto campus. All of them were in compliance with their masks. We haven't had any issues with masks, no discipline issues about anything in terms of compliance. And then, again, that's a testament to our staff providing information and just expectations with students before and when they finally came on the campus. Like I said, our staff was prepared. They're the best at what they do, and I am extremely proud of our staff, and I'm humbled to be a part of the program. So thank you.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
loved
Mall.
your balloons.
All right, thank you. Staff was there early. I think part of the intimidation is we had staff lined up in socially distanced manner, and students kind of didn't know where to go because we're kind of covering everything. So that was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mall. Again, you can see his passion for his school and what a great job he does. Our next slide is safety and sanitation. Mr. Boltema.
Sure. So on the slide, there's a pretty long list of items that we were able to provide for the start of school, from signage to social distancing stickers on the ground to the hand sanitizers at the entry points to our schools. But this represents a lot of work, and a lot of work that happened early, all the way from our business service side, making sure they ordered the materials, to really our staff getting those out. I will point out, we think it went well, but we had a couple challenges, just to admit to the board. The water, the neutral electrolyzed water, which is we think a very good disinfectant, didn't arrive over the weekend like we were promised, and we were scrambling to provide regular water in classrooms for the start Monday morning. To give credit to our maintenance staff, they went out on a Sunday and also found disinfectant wipes, and we were able to put those in classrooms to be available for teachers and staff and students that wanted to use it. So again, it was a problem, but we had a solution to the problem. And I would give a lot of credit to that staff. We had custodians and maintenance people that were out at our schools at 2 in the morning, making sure that what we promised people was there, even though it wasn't the new water and exactly what we said was going to be there. At least we provided the bottles that we said were, and certainly the effort was there to make it happen. The order did show up Monday morning at 9 a.m., and we had to do the entire process over again. And I would say by Tuesday morning, 95% of all the classrooms had new water in the bottles with the microfiber cloths and ready to go.
That's amazing.
So it was good work. It wasn't obviously ideal. It was a very stressful weekend for our staff, but I do think we provided a safe environment for kids. And I will say our custodial staff, I was able to visit 4 during the AM/PM transition for elementary. And that microfiber cloth system that we've placed in those classrooms got a lot of positive feedback on those from our custodians. They really felt like they could hit all those desktops and high-touch areas very quickly. And the last thing that isn't mentioned here, but I did want to note, our maintenance people and our grounds people, all of support staff, if you know that the grass isn't mowed right now, because they've been on site with a cloth, with disinfectant, literally walking the campuses throughout the day, making sure that those areas were wiped down. And they're really smart, because they were always in areas that were highly visible, and they were always in areas that were highly used. So I just can't thank our staff enough for really working outside their job descriptions, but they were doing that to make sure we had a safe environment for kids. So.
Thank you, Mr. Boltema.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Beltran, especially for staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning and making sure it was all done. We appreciate that.
Well, I left at 12:30, and then staff stayed until 2. So.
Okay.
All right, next slide is communication and technology. I'm going to start it off with Mr. Vincent back here behind the curtain, as we call him, Mr. the Wizard of Oz.
Good evening, board. Yeah, I'm back here behind the curtain. So I just want to report the first few days of school, we had no big issues with technology, always a plus. Sometimes the first day of school can be a little rough, but it went really smoothly this year. I went to 8 different school sites and talked to admins, and things were very good. So one thing that really stood out when I was going to different school sites, though, is the number of ViewSonic TVs that are being used by our staff. And I had the same thing talking to other admins, the same thing. Those new ViewSonics are just being used extensively in our classrooms right now. They're fantastic machines. They're not just TVs. I talked to Mr. Whitaker today when I was coming in, and he said one of his math teachers was taking students were able to throw up to him the problems they were having issues with, and he could put that on the ViewSonic and then do the problem in front of everyone on the ViewSonic so all the kids could see the problem that student was having. So it just is a great platform for all of our people, all of our kids and our teachers. And I just wanted to say Phil Morgan did a fantastic job of getting that project done in a very quick timeline. He also, yes, give applause. And he also was taking care of the training. So we had a lot of training on this. We had Chico High School had 6 trainings, and I know all of our schools had multiple trainings. We have more to come. So as teachers learn the basics, we'll then have ViewSonic come in and teach them those more complex things that really allow them to utilize this technology to its fullest extent. The other thing I want to mention too is Patrick Bassetti has been working on changing out our older access points, our wireless access points at our schools, just to make sure we have the most bandwidth possible for all those Chromebooks that are out there that the kids are bringing back. So he's working on that. Probably next month or so, this will all be changed out and we all on the newest access points.
Thank you, John. You know, that's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that most people don't know about, so we really appreciate your getting everything up to speed so this works well. That was a big issue at the very beginning of this, the whole online, so thank you very much for taking care of that, and Patrick.
John, I want to know what happens when my 5-year-old is 10 and knows more than I do about any of that stuff.
Also, we were able to get mics and headphones for families, for students that do not have them. So we handed those out to all the principals at all the schools to make sure that the students that are still doing the distance learning had the proper equipment to go with their Chromebooks. We heard that was something that they needed. Also, we send out multiple communications to families regarding the new safety protocols for their students to come on. A lot of our principals at our schools did great videos showing where their kids had to go in, what gates, what the protocols and distance that they needed to be for the social distancing. There is a video clip there from Neil Dow, but we're not going to show it tonight, but we wanted to put it on there for you to watch. But a lot of schools have similar videos. The Neil Dow one was very cute that they did. Also, our teachers on that Thursday and Friday before we went to this Monday showed those video clips and also introduced themselves, where their classrooms were, what the safety protocols were going to be in their classrooms. So they did an excellent job on that Thursday and Friday to let kids know what they're going to have to be, and their parents what the expectations were going to be. They did a wonderful job. I just watched a Chico High one today that was amazing also, so it was really good. Next thing we want to do, Tina out there in the crowd, she's done, again, we talked about it at the last board meeting, a masterful job to make sure that we are able to get our workday child supervision for our workers for AM, PM. If their kids had students going on the AM, that they had the PM child care, then if their students with the PM, they had the AM. So they did a masterful job of trying to meet the needs of all of them. I think that we have a couple that we're still fixing, but I think that she had those done today. But she did a great job for how many people had to do that. Nutrition Services done an amazing job. We talked about this again last board meeting, but the AM students come in and eat breakfast at the campus in the morning if they like, and then they take the lunch on their way out. The PM students come in and eat their lunch on campus, and then they take their breakfast on the way out for the next morning. So that's the way events has been going. So they have 2 meals for them every day. And transportation has been doing a great job of making sure that we get our special ed and our foster and homeless students to school. So that's our presentation. If you could see that picture, there was that PV. It was in their Yale building where it says, "Welcome back. We can't mask how excited we are to see you," but there was a lot of those type of sayings, a lot of our schools. It's just amazing. Our students, one, they were a little shocked to be in that school, but how well-behaved they were and how they wanted to follow protocols, even on the one-ways. They're doing an amazing job. We all split up and went to different schools. I think we all went to at least 5 to 8 schools that first day to see how it went. We hit a few yesterday also. So everything's seen. We know it's early on, just like it is on any early on of a school year. Everybody's doing what they need to do, but so far, so good. So if we have any questions or any comments, that's the end of this presentation.
Yes, Eileen?
Yes, thank you. I was out doing errands this morning. It was such a nice, warm feeling to see yellow school buses around town. I ran into bus 40, so I guess Susie is driving, unless she's changed buses. Bus 40 was out and about along with a couple of the other smaller special ed buses. It was just a wonderful feeling to see yellow school buses back in our town.
I have a comment and a question.
Sure, go ahead, Linda.
So my comment is, along the lines of Eileen's, I have gotten such positive feedback from some students who I know personally. They are so excited to be back at school. Even if it's just for a short time, they were really, really glad to be there. And I really appreciated this presentation too, because I've been wanting to know what's happening behind the scenes because I haven't been to the classrooms. My question is for my board colleagues and possibly for Kelly Staley too. In fact, I think I actually want to make a public apology. When we, at our last board meeting, talked about a third option, Tom Lando, bless you, Tom, you know, you were really clear in pointing out we don't really know what we're voting for. I thought that we were voting to develop a third option, a hybrid program. It was never my intention to actually require teachers to simultaneously Zoom and teach in person. But somehow that's what was construed by both teachers and by parents. So I don't know how that happened. And I don't know if the board can help me understand that. Was I sleeping? I might have been. Did I not hear something correctly? How did we go from voting on the development of a third option to we're going to simultaneously teach in person and Zoom? And why is that now the only third option or hybrid option that we're talking about?
Well, Linda, I can help you understand that.
Thank you.
What
Please
happened?
do.
Sure. What happened at our last meeting was that we had a teacher who had proposed a plan where, for the AB schedule, where it would be Zooming on the alternative days. And that was a plan that was widely distributed, and numerous teachers were supporting that plan. And we assumed that that was what it was going to look like. Well, we did not realize, we did not know that that really wasn't a plan that a majority of teachers did back. Because when it came time to, and you'll recall that negotiations were beginning the next day.
Correct.
So
I had no idea that this was even going down that road.
Okay, so what had happened is we had received information from the union that they were open to this concept, and it was going to be negotiated in some form. And what we had agreed to was go back and do that. But, you know, there were certain restrictions that we had to comply with. There is it AB 98? Is that the name of it? There are restrictions on that where you actually do have to have some presence in the classroom, and the students have to check in, and that is something where the Zoom is required. So it would have had to look like what the teacher had put forward, where it was Zooming some of the time and in-person instruction. But when it came right down to it, the teachers were not willing to do that at the high school level. We had a lot of buy-in from the teachers at the elementary, and as you've heard from the discussion tonight, at the middle school and at the elementary, they don't seem to have those problems because it's a whole different kind of structure. They're not teaching, 6 classes or whatever, and it's just not, it hasn't been a manageable type of situation. So it's, we wanted to provide an option because so many parents had contacted us and said, we
have the best of intentions to do that.
We don't want Oak Bridge, but then we don't feel comfortable sending our kids back. And so we tried to do our best to provide that, and our people are still working on schedules to try to make that happen. And my understanding is, I don't know if I have my notes handy here, but over 30 sections were added to the high schools in order to try to get that to work at a cost of over $300,000. We are, working hard, but this is a 10% of the population, the student population that this is, affecting. And granted, that's important, but a lot of effort is going for that. So I'd have to say that, we didn't have a lot of information, and we made certain assumptions about, well, if this was being put forth as a plan and we were hearing from so many teachers that it was acceptable to them, that they were willing to do it, which didn't turn out to be true. So that's where it left us at the point where we are now trying to make things work out to the best as possible. But I don't think it was, I think it was just how things evolved, and that we were trying to take into consideration what was being, asked of us. And,
Right.
and yes, the scenario that Tom painted of, having a teacher try to Zoom, having a teacher try to address the class.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
that's a, a very difficult thing. It may be workable, and it seems to be working at some of the schools, say Rosedale. They just explained that, is a possibility there, and they're using it. However, when you've got 6 classes, that's, it's just, it's very, very difficult. So at this point, because, it can't meet the requirements of this AB 98 for check-ins, we're going to look into the AB as we promised to see if it is viable for possibly starting in January. But it's not something, what we have to be facing now, and we're going to get into that on our next item, is what's happening now with the stage that we're in, and the negotiations have to go on with the teachers in order to prepare ourselves for that next stage. So
Absolutely.
we have to go with that, and continue to try to make things work for those students whose schedules they want to have the third option. But it wasn't fully formed, and a few assumptions were made.
Also, Linda.
Thank you for that. But again, I do really sincerely want to apologize to staff and to parents who misconstrued our best intention. So thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
Sure.
Yeah, and Linda, I just want to make sure that we did not mandate our teachers to Zoom and teach at the same time. In the MOU, it's volunteer only. And right
Good.
now, we do have a lot of our teachers now have changed over to do it. We have all of our teachers at Chico Junior and I believe Bidwell, and all of our junior high teachers. And now we're getting quite a few numbers of our high school teachers that are doing it also. So it's something that we work, but it was not mandated. But we do also have where teachers are only doing online some of their periods too. So that's not a hybrid. That's a full online class. So there is different options when it comes to that third option.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Kevin has a comment? Liz, will you call on Kevin?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't see.
So I just want to start with happy people never call me. So this is totally biased information. Nobody's calling me to say how good it's working. But there's a lot of tension out there. It is voluntary, but teachers are feeling pressure to volunteer from parents and those that have volunteered have gotten a lot of negative feedback from parents that it's not good enough. Those that haven't volunteered have gotten a lot of negative feedback of why aren't you volunteering? So while it is truly voluntary, that's a kind of a subjective term when you've got parents emailing you, why won't you do this for my child? So I just want to, but again, I'm only hearing for the people that are not, no one's calling me to say how good it's working.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's, you try to please people as much as you can, but sometimes it just, there's things limitations that we have too. And, our ability to have enough teachers and our ability to pay for the type of things that we're talking about may not be feasible. Okay, so if there's no more, I'm sorry. Okay, so thank you very much for that update. Appreciate that. Appreciate all the teachers, principals, and others who participated and shared the information. Thank you for being with us tonight. Our next item of business, since this was strictly informational, is discussion action item with regards to transitions between stages of reopening. Yes, Ms. Staley.
Okay, thank you very much, and it is great to have people in our audience again, as well as seeing our kids back on our campuses and our staff as well. So just as kind of a reminder, back in July 15th, the board adopted the stages of reopening. And at the time when they were adopted, we were in stage 2, which is back where we are right now, which is the modified traditional AM/PM schedule. Before we were even able to open, we had been planning for that AM/PM modified traditional, but before we were able to open, the state and Butte County went onto the COVID monitoring list, which now is referred to as Tier Purple. So at that point, we had to make a pivot. We're about 2.5 weeks away from the opening of school. We had to make the pivot and go to online learning, which was stage 1. We have now moved back into that stage 2, or now it's called the red tier, which is the AM/PM. And in fact, Butte County, if we maintain the numbers that we currently have, will be in orange tier, which would be stage 3. And in that stage, we would, per the reopening plan, move to a traditional schedule with safety measures in place. And then ultimately, the yellow tier is full reopening of school. And I would suspect at that point, we would still have some safety measures in place, but not to the extent that we have them right now when we get to those numbers. So one of the things, and the reason this is on the agenda, is at our last board meeting, late in the evening, we were running out of time, and the question was asked, how do we determine the amount of time between when we move to a new tier, and when the instructional models change to mirror that tier? And I think that was some of the pushback that we heard going both ways is, why are we not moving faster now that we are in the red tier? How come we're not opening up tomorrow? And then the flip side of that is, why haven't we taken more time and had more planning before we move into that? So I think it needs to be a board discussion as to when we move from tier to tier, whether we move from red to orange, or, and I sure hope this is not the case, but if we move from red back into purple, what is that time frame when the county changes their color tier and then the instructional model moves to mirror that tier? So hopefully I set that stage and will allow for some board discussion along those lines.
Okay, yes, Kathy?
So I've had teachers from outside the district contacting me. They either live in Chico or their kids go to school in Chico, but they are teaching somewhere else. And so that discussion is literally not just Chico Unified, it's flowing around the county. And so a couple of considerations. Watching your grandchild at 5 go marching off into school, I know many parents and grandparents took a deep breath of, oh my God, I hope this will be okay. And I have felt, and Kevin outlined some of this, that we have done an extraordinary job with all our safety modifications. And really, I didn't see any kids, really young kids, acting out about their mask. However, we just got to orange, and the normative framework has been you go at least 2 weeks in that, and then you go another 2 weeks to make sure it's holding. And we know that there are already several explosions, if you would, going on around us. Shasta just blew up, highest test rate in the country. Red Bluff High just had an explosion of 17 students testing positive, and the school was not informed until after they came back. So I'm really, really concerned about the issue of people demanding, okay, now jump to the next hurdle, because everything has to settle. Classrooms and teachers have to, I believe, settle. But also, there's not a single classroom in the state of California that I'm aware of that can do social distancing and have all their kids back. I mean, we didn't build our classrooms to those specifications. We built them to a certain number of kids. And so my concern would be that, one, we want to make sure that we can really hold that line. We're doing really well, but Shasta just blew up, and Tehama has a big hit. And so, you know, when you look at the color map, and I watched the news yesterday, 3 different versions of it, we're the only orange in a sea of red. And so it isn't like we're, you know, isolated. We're not Lassen way off in the hinterlands. And I also feel very strongly that our teachers who have been working so incredibly hard and our students need the time to bond with their current situation. So they're comfortable, the students are comfortable, and the teachers are comfortable about the next day they go to school, what's it going to be like? That they have a sense that they know and they feel safe.
Okay. So I just want to clarify a little bit here. If we were just this week told that we are now in the orange category. So that's assuming that we maintain this status for 2 weeks, and then there's an additional 2 weeks, no?
No, I was able to get that clarified through Butte County Public Health today, and there is not an additional 2 weeks once we are open before we change, because really once we were able to open, that was an individual school district determination of how they were going to open. So for example, in Gridley, they're back 100%, all students 6 periods a day. That is not how we chose to do it, but that's a different community. So we have the ability, the only time it would be an issue is when we go back into purple, and per our plan that was adopted by the board, if we move back into purple, we would move back into an online instructional model. And if we did not, then there is a requirement that we do testing of staff, that we increase testing.
Okay, so it's, we have 2 weeks before we're teamed, you know, just deemed that we're out of the woods as far as, you know, we're in the orange. And so nothing could happen until 2 weeks anyhow.
Correct.
And then we have the discretion as to when we can, if we choose to open up after that. So what you're really asking us right now is to set up some sort of protocol so people know.
Right.
And they can plan, okay, we're going to allow 4 weeks, or we're going to, you know, whatever. But that, and just so everyone knows too, that on July 15th, we had established that when the stage, if the stage were to reverse order and go backwards, that we would automatically go to online, revert to online. So, but we have the power to decide not to do that. We have more discretionary power at this point because we have opened up. So we are not forced to do that. We can choose to do that. We can choose to maintain that, or we can choose other, another plan to say, okay, we'll look at different things that are going on in the communities. We'll look at the status of actually what's happening. We actually have more discretion. We don't have to follow that automatic go back.
So I would clarify that I believe what the board adopted was that you would mirror the stages of reopening to the stages of instruction. And so with purple, which at that point was the COVID monitoring list, would be online. Red would be the modified traditional AM/PM. Orange would be traditional with safety measures in place, and yellow would be back to a more traditional. I believe that's what the board has in place right now. However, the governor has said that once you are in school, in person, you do not have to go back out, even if you fall into the purple category. I think what I was looking for more from the board is what is the time frame? Mm-hmm. So if we move, what is the time frame for going from stage to stage, so that that's clear with our community. This last time we went to red, and we had 4.5 weeks between going to red initially and then starting back with the AM/PM. So just to give our community, I think, a little more heads up on that. And then I do believe that if we are not going to go back to online, if we fall back into purple, then we should clarify that
Right.
as well.
Right, okay. Eileen, you had something?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. A couple of different issues from my perspective. I do believe that it's really, really good news that we've gone to orange. However, we are about to have significant family gatherings because of the types of holidays that are in front of us. And in listening to caution from epidemiologists about where they are seeing spikes in COVID increases, it's because of the smaller family gatherings where households have expanded their contact to other members of the family that aren't necessarily currently living in the household. And that's what's coming up. I also think that we do need to make a decision about what kind of markers we're going to use to take a look at whether or not to take an action if we go back to purple. I would consider taking a look at, does our district have an increase in cases because of testing, or is it a community spread issue that's, say we had another facility for retired folks have another spike in cases. I think that we need to examine how are we doing versus how the community's doing. Because, you know, as we've just heard tonight, we are doing a phenomenal job of trying to keep our folks, everybody, safe. And the compliance from our students and staff is wonderful. Like the teachers reported, the students are not objecting. And yeah, it's all new and, you know, it may get to be old hat, but they're going to get reminded, do you want to go back to not being able to come to school anymore? That's a big driver. Educating them about the fact that we need to be careful outside of school as well as in school is another important thing, and I think our staff is doing that. I also think that what we have just put all of our staff through from July 15th to this past Monday, I'm amazed that so many of them are still standing, quite frankly. And I don't want to take a look at making a change now that doesn't align itself with the semester break that and I know we're some that are on the trimesters, but I'd like to just plan on staying where we are. Now, the other reality is if we stay at orange through the holidays and we get to the semester, how long would it take to open everything back up with planning? Well, it's taken us 4 to 5 weeks doing it at, you know, breakneck pace along with negotiating of any additional changes. And even though we have a lot of things in place now, I still think that we need to give our staff and students a chance to take what we've learned since July and apply it to the next change and not have it be in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Although if the numbers stay down, which I don't expect, I really don't think we're going to be that lucky. But if we are, I'd like to get everybody back for second semester if possible. But I don't think we should do it in less than a 4-week transition. And if you look at the way our holidays are spaced right now, we don't have 4 weeks.
Yes, Tom.
Thank you. I agree the upcoming holidays are a concern in terms of spread. I'm also concerned still with the amount of testing or lack thereof that's done in Butte County. It doesn't give me a lot of faith in all the numbers we're getting. Beyond that, which is all speculation at this point, I would just like to get a quick update on where we are in terms of our contact tracing system. Do we have an established system now? And how quickly do we know once an outbreak has occurred in our sphere of influence, among our staff or our students?
Well, outbreaks are self-reported, and so we know as soon as we're told. Like we know from Red Bluff, unless it's indicated from the parents or the students themselves, we won't know until it actually comes to our attention. As far as contact tracing, once we have students back into the classroom, that falls on us, so it's our school nurses that will be doing that. Tina and I are meeting with the school nurses along with Diane Olson at their very next meeting, and we're going to be having that conversation. They've been doing a lot of that to some extent on following the case by cases and working with staff to determine when people can return based on if the test is positive, their contact, asking all the questions that the health department gives to us as far as, did you have direct contact? Were you masked at the time? Were you around them for, less than 6 feet for 15 minutes or longer? Was it an initial contact? Was it an immediate contact, or was it a secondary where you were in contact with somebody else that was, exposed? All those types of questions that enter into those questions. So to answer your question, Tom, it's going to be our nurses that are going to play a huge part in that. The health department won't be doing that on a case-by-case basis for us now that students are back in. But we're working through that process right now.
Trustee Lando, if I can add too, we have asked staff to create seating charts. So so we can prepare for contact tracing. So I don't know if you saw in one of the pictures in the presentation, but as students walked in, very specific seating charts with labeled seats. So in preparation for contact tracing.
If I may ask a follow-up, and this is just my lack of legal knowledge, do we have any standing to require self-reporting as a requirement for coming on campus?
I don't believe so. We have policy that we are asking parents to go through a list of, do you have a fever, do you have a cough, and ask to self-report those types of things. But I don't think there's any recourse that we have if they do not immediately report.
Yeah, HIPAA protections are there where we cannot require medical information. However, I think we have done a very good job of getting information out saying, please do not come to school if you have a temperature. Please do not come to school if you have a cough or are not feeling well. But at the end of the day, we have to trust people. And I know that's hard.
And again, just forgive me for my lack of knowledge. We can require people to disclose their vaccination status.
They have to show us evidence of having a vaccination, correct?
Okay, so that's like a carve out in the law around.
Well, it is a law, correct?
Well, yes.
And we can send students home if they're clearly ill, so they don't infect other students.
So I know from having spoken to Monica Soderstrom, the head of nursing for public health, that she is meeting regularly with the nurses, and they're keeping this, on their radar, and they're working hard to make sure that the schools are safe. And I know Monica said she's very confident that this is going to happen, and it is going to be doable to keep the kids safe. So.
I'm going to jump in here for a minute. Diane Olson, who has been working very closely with the nurses on all of the protocols, does have her hand up. If we
Okay,
can let
great.
Diane
Yes,
in.
Diane.
Hi, everyone. So I did want to update you on these first 3 days of school, some of the things that the nurses have been sure to do. We have had students that have been sent to the office for having symptoms. The nurses are checking those students, and in some cases, students have been sent home. However, most of the students that have been sent home, the symptoms are related to some other illness and not necessarily to COVID. And that's typical. I asked them how many they usually have in a regular year, and they said it was very typical to what happens every year as students come in. We haven't had any COVID positive reports reported back yet. And then also in relation to the question on immunizations, we do follow Ed Code and the immunization law of reporting, and our health aides and nurses have been working closely with all the parents that do not have their complete set of immunizations and making sure that those are completed before students attend classes in person.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Diane. Yes, Kathy?
So the flu shot is not a mandated vaccine, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it is not mandated.
And HEPA, apparently, since Red Bluff High is in a different county that was in a different status than we were, but when I find out that 17 high school kids all got it and then all came back at basically the same time and didn't tell anybody, and then that made a teacher get it and that teacher's child, that suggests to me that those were, and I don't know this, that they might have been participating in an organized event, like perhaps a sport. So the reality is, we can't make them tell us, and whereas I would hope every parent would feel compelled to let us know there had been a chance of contagion, obviously that didn't happen there. So I'm completely agreeing with Eileen that I think that we should wait until the start of spring semester in January. We'll have a much better understanding of how the flu is impacting us, and thankfully many people in Butte have been getting the shots or the nose spray, how the flu is impacting us, but also with these counties blowing up around us, how well our own health standards and belief systems are working, that people are doing everything they can to stay safe and keep their kids safe.
Okay, so, all right, we've had two people express support of an idea to just, regardless of whether we stay in the orange stage, to defer any changes to the instructional models that we're using now until the first of the year, when school starts again after winter break. Linda, how do you feel about that?
Yep, actually, I would like to weigh in on that. I'm very excited to be in orange, for sure, but I would have to agree with my two colleagues. Let's hold, let's pause, let's give teachers a chance to breathe, and our support staff, as well as our students. Let our students get in a routine. You know, I think about the special education students. Let's get in a routine. Let's talk with our unions about what this orange phase will look like. It will give us some time to do that. And we will come back after spring, after the holidays, for spring semester, and start it then, the full-time in-person school. I also want to talk about going backwards into purple. I think that's another question Kelly wanted answered here. I'm feeling hopeful that being in the orange, we're not going to jump back 2 tiers into purple. But, you know, what do we want to do if that does happen? Again, I'm not sure I'm ready to just bounce back into an online situation. You know, we may have to go back to an AM/PM model. I'm open to suggestions on this, but, you know, if we are not required to go back to full-time distance learning if we go back 2 tiers into purple. I'm not sure I want to do that. So
Okay,
I
well,
would like to present that for discussion as well.
sure. What I would recommend is that we try to retain as much discretionary power as we have. We have understood that in Butte County, there have been, a lot of COVID cases that have been with the senior citizen community in some of the care homes. We have some pretty large care homes and if there was an upsurge there, certainly that could bring the numbers really high, but it wouldn't be something that would be probably impacting school-age students that much. People who are in those care homes are pretty much kept away from anybody else, and so that would be one thing, or in the jails. So not to say that that's not important or we should disregard that, but just if we can retain some discretionary power around that, then we can decide. So what I would suggest is that should we start heading back into that purple zone and we get notification like we did just this week that we were in the red zone, if we get notification that we're in the purple zone, that then at our next scheduled board meeting, we discuss and decide whether the circumstances require us to go back to online. If they warrant it, based on the particulars of what's going on in the community and, where the hot spots are, what's actually going on. Because now we do have the power to make that decision, whereas before we didn't have the power. So, and then with regards to the first item that was brought up, the red zone, I too would agree that waiting until January before we make any changes. We've got kids that are going to be having Halloween, then they're going to be having Thanksgiving, then they're going to be having Christmas, and all of these things are activity, rich type of events, and the potential for contagion would seem to increase with those, not to mention the fact that it is flu season, and so I would also go along with everyone else. And Tom, how do you feel about that?
Spring, I'm definitely in favor of that.
Okay.
So I do want to jump in and just remind the board we do have a speaker.
Okay,
at least one speaker on this topic.
We'll get to that. We're on the verge here of consensus, and before we make any final decision, we will entertain any public comment. Yes, Eileen.
Thank you. I pulled up the district calendar to take a look at how much time we have between now and coming back to school after winter break. And we've got 6 weeks, and they're not even full weeks because of the other holidays. If we're going to make a decision about making a change when we come back, we'd really have to start that transitioning thought process and planning process now.
Well, Mr. Hanlon is already starting the process with the, employee groups.
Right.
And that's a big thing. But, reducing the requirements is a lot easier than where we went. We had to go full bore in trying to put all these things in place, and now we would be not having as many requirements. So if we were to retain as many as we have going into orange, we'd be in good shape. So we don't have, we have to plan more in the way of our employee groups, I think, than we have to worry about safety, because safety is at its highest level here. And so going to a lower level, we're not going to have to do so much. We would actually be able to reduce some of those requirements.
I'm totally focused on the implementation through the work with classes and redesigning staffing and class schedules. I understand that that's a rather significant step if we decide we're going to go full in person. at the beginning of the year.
So if I can just, because I want to comment on that. So it's much more difficult to go from purple to red with a AM/PM because it changes the fundamental working conditions of our staff.
Yes.
And we had a lot of issues that we had to negotiate with both unions to make that happen. We had daycare issues that were very difficult to overcome. All those issues disappear when you go from red to orange. We still have the safety issues that we need to talk about, but we can essentially, if we had to, now there's some things we need to talk about to make that smooth, but we can essentially go back to a normal schedule with normal working conditions and starting times and class periods and lunch times and all of those things in an orange atmosphere. So there's a lot less to negotiate than we had to negotiate from going from purple to red. So I think it can happen a lot quicker is the bottom line.
Okay, we would leave the third option on the table because personal preference, a number of families, at least the ones that are indicating through emails to me, they're not ready to go back, even at the semester. So we would be able to maintain that site-based enrollment option.
So I don't see it happening for elementary.
Right,
because
no,
you have to make-
I'm
you have to
sorry,
make a-
Jim, I meant secondary.
Yeah, you have to make a choice one way or the other in elementary. In secondary, there is, because you're creating a new master schedule, you can place, from the beginning of the process, you can place online courses throughout the day. It may or may not have the same number of options. That's something we need to be very clear. We had great difficulty getting all of the options in the current schedule. So it may not be that wide open. But as far as, you don't have to redesign the whole master schedule after you've already designed it. That was the problem we had, to do in a week. We can start on that now, or go back to the original schedule we had and then intersperse online classes throughout the day. They're just not going to have as many options as people that are online because the overwhelming majority of people want to come back. And I suspect if we go into orange, there's going to be even more that want to come back.
Well, I think actually our path is pretty clear, at least to me. That is to proceed to iron out any wrinkles that it would take to go to full in-person classes at the semester. And also change our stated intent that if we do in fact go back to purple, that we go back and re-examine our decision, that we make our decision optional at that point as to whether or not to go back to full online, that we not stay with that previous decision and we make it, optional at this point. Because if we plan to go back in person, and if we find out just before winter break that that's not looking like a good idea because of cases, to not do it wouldn't really be any kind of a problem. So I think our decision here is pretty clear. We look at best case scenario and plan on coming back full in December, make a second decision that we will look at our decision if we go back to purple, and everybody then knows where we stand.
So the only other thing to consider is if we remain in red going into the spring semester, it has budgetary implications. We have spent a lot of dollars on adding 30-plus sections into the master schedules. That's for a half a semester. Now, if you go into it, going into red, it could be for a full semester. So you've just added a lot of costs to a budget that's going to be strained already for that third option. That was for that third option.
Oh, okay, thank you, because all of a sudden you lost me.
Yeah. So-
I saw big dollars, but I wasn't seeing the reason behind it. Okay.
Because of the implementation of the third option, we had to
So-
add sections because it was just
Yeah.
impossible to make a master schedule work.
Because of that cost, then, it would seem as though if that option has to go away, that, that Oak Ridge just becomes, even though it's not the popular option, it may in fact be the only option for families that truly feel yet they're not ready to, have in-person contact.
Okay, Tom? I know. I am
Yeah.
going to listen to the board first, and then we will get to the speaker.
And in fact, I wanted to address that just briefly, and then I think there was some maybe misspeaking. You're talking about approaching consensus, and I don't want it to seem as though we're approaching consensus before we get input from the speakers. It's important that our public and our speakers are a part of that process of forming.
Yes, there's protocol, though, on we listen to each other first.
Oh, I understand.
And we listen to what our staff tells us, and then we listen to the public.
That's, of course, and I just wanted to clear up that language. That I didn't want anyone to think that we were pre-gaming and not going to listen before we made our decision. So on that note, Eileen just brought up that if we are still, if I heard that right, if we're still in red when we go to the next semester, we may not have the third Zooming option, the hybrid option?
It's possible.
We're in
It's
orange.
just going to have budgetary implications, and
Okay.
you're going to have to make that decision on whether to spend those dollars on those sections. Because the issue of having that third option, the expense of it isn't going to go away. It'll still be there.
And in casting, Oak Ridge is the only other option. I think that one of the reasons that people didn't want to go to Oak Ridge this time was not simply choice, but that there were questions about AP courses being available at Oak Ridge, and that question will remain. So I think we need to be careful that our AP students especially have been working for a long time to meet this goal, and we need to keep them especially in mind if we're going to say, hey, it's just either Oak Ridge or in person, because that's when it's going to impact a lot of kids.
Okay, so we have some good ideas. When we're having a discussion, it's very important for us to maintain the continuity of the flow of logic that is being presented in a discussion. And so if we have to interject speakers, this, that, the other, it's very difficult to maintain the flow and for us to establish ideas and a process that we're working towards. So not to say that it's not important to hear from the public, but that we need to know what we're talking about first and get our ideas straight, and then we'll take the public. So anyhow, we'll take the public.
Thank you. I think you suggested that we would have speakers in person first.
Yes, we can do that, and then we'll take a phone call.
Hey everybody, Matt Tennis here, Chico Parents for In-Person Learning. I think that you should not get your thought process all lined out and figured out before you hear from the public. I think you should hear from the public and see what we bring to the conversation, and then maybe make your plan for what you want to do and how you want to reopen. I am frankly shocked and blindsided at the way this conversation has gone tonight. The first, I don't know how long it was that we heard the initial presentation on agenda item 811, but basically we had a lot of just really authentic fanfare over how great the reopening was going. Granted, we're only three days in, but kids are loving it, parents are loving it, the safety protocols are all being followed to the T. It's wonderful, everything is going absolutely great. Okay? And then we heard real examples from teachers and staff of how positive they all thought it was in every respect. But now it comes time to decide what we're going to do about the fact that the tiers have changed and we're now totally in orange. Okay, Governor Gavin Newsom and Mark Galley, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, they think it's okay for us to be back in class now full-time at a regular schedule with safety precautions, okay? But who is more conservative than Governor Gavin Newsom and Mark Galley? The Chico Unified School District Board of Trustees. We are being more conservative than they are in Sacramento. National news outlets. I subscribe to the print edition, yes, that's right, of the New York Times. It's a very impressive erudite thing for me to do, way out here in Chico, to subscribe to the New York Times. Well, the New York Times is reporting that kids being back in school in New York full-time is not contributing to the spread of COVID. I am also an avid NPR listener. NPR is also reporting that kids being in school does not contribute to the spread of COVID. Dr. Mark Galley, for weeks now, has been reporting that kids being in school does not contribute to the spread of COVID. I think that maybe the one flaw here is that you guys think that this online Zoom school thing is actually pretty great. Well, it's not great. Okay, there are some round pegs out there. There's some kids who can sit in front of a computer screen for 2-3 hours and can get their school experience from that, and also from the, whatever you call the other learning that they do. But at least 2 of my kids are not that. Okay, and I wasn't that when I was a kid. And I have a lot of people in my coalition, hundreds of them actually, for whom their kids are not that either. And Zoom school, it's bad, all right? It's not great. What is great is being back in school, as we've seen for the last 3 days, and we need to keep that pattern going, and we need to embrace the fact that we are now in orange, that Sacramento is giving us a green light, and we should get back to school. Thank you.
Since this isn't items from the floor, we can respond. And what I'd like to say is that we do not have to do what anybody else does. This is a board that makes its decisions based on science, based on what our public health department says, and that's what we do. That's what this board does. We do not just listen to a group that makes the most noise. We listen to all groups. I thought maybe you were going to come ahead and tell us how happy you were that we had started and had kids in school, since that's what you've been clamoring for months. So I really don't know, Mr. Tennis, what's going to make you happy? You know, do you want us to disregard all public health recommendations and send kids back? You know, I realize you're running for the board and you want to have a platform, but really? Is that what you want us to do? Totally disregard that? You mentioned a couple of people, but, you know, that's not everybody. We just heard that Red Bluff had 17 cases that just emerged. We have a holiday season coming up. We're not going to act irresponsibly just because you keep coming here and making noise. So I'm sorry if you feel that way. But this is a board that thinks independently, considers all opinions, considers objective information out there, and doesn't just bow to the loudest speaker or the person who harasses us the most. So, do we have a motion? Oh.
We do not have any more speakers. Mr. Tennis was the only other speaker from that would have called in.
Yes, Eileen.
Thank you, Madam President. I too survey all of the data information from exactly the same places that Mr. Tennis just mentioned. I come away with a different opinion. And I also have a lot of input from the emails that we get. I mean, we all do. The first Sunday, I didn't have 100 new emails in my in-basket was last week. And I went out on Facebook and it said, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I don't have, and someone said, search your spam file. I feel the weight of everyone's voice, whether it's loud and organized or just gut-wrenchingly important to that parent and that family. I think that's the role of a board member. We have to use our own instincts, combining all of the input that we get, including weight from the staff that we,
Exactly.
have come to trust because of our experience with their advice. I take offense at it being suggested that that we're somehow or other not listening. We are. I am.
Thank you, Eileen. We have, Kevin, did you want to speak? Mr. Moretti?
I did, thank you. It seems to me that there's two decisions being made. One is when to come back more full-time if we stay in orange, and I would say, so I sent out a survey to the staff of teachers, and I had just over a 50% respond, and the majority of those would agree with your decision to hold off changing until spring, until the spring semester, just to, as I think many of you have mentioned, can we just get this down first before you make this change again? So that part, I would, at least from the people, again, just half that responded to me, but of those half, they would, the vast majority would agree with you there. The other, I don't know if you're voting on this right now or not, but the other is what happens if we go backwards. And so I had 350 people respond, 216 left comments, and almost everyone, whether they want, so my one question to them was, did you agree with the district's decision to have kids come back while we were in red? It was about 40% yes and 60% no. But no matter how they voted, all of them were very concerned about staying in person if we went to purple. And it sounds like you're not voting, or if we went back to purple. It sounds like you're not voting on that right now and you're gonna postpone that till later, but that will be, an issue, at least with CUTA, if the decision is to stay in person when Butte County goes, if Butte County goes back into purple.
Okay, yeah, we actually are going to vote on that because that is another thing that we have to decide while this topic is up, but we are running out of time, and so we've kind of rehashed things. Linda, yeah, if you want to speak.
Yes, just one last thing. I want to thank Kevin for his input on that. That was great. Also, I want to address Mr. Tennis just briefly, reiterating what Eileen says. We are listening to you. We absolutely are listening to you. We're listening to all the parents. Our emails are overflowing, our phone calls. But one of the things that he didn't mention, and Kevin kind of spoke about it a little bit. Our staff have been through a wild ride, not just teachers, but support staff, our district office staff, since March. It's been here and there and pivot and go backwards, and a new regulation coming down. We need some time to breathe. We need the children to get into a routine, and we need our staff to get into a routine. So with that, I would like to make a motion, Madam President, if you're ready.
Sure.
Okay, I would like to move that we postpone the full-time in-person classroom until spring semester. And I don't know if you want to do the purple thing on a separate motion.
Yeah, we're going to do that. We can do that separately.
Thank you.
Separate, okay. So
Yeah, let's do it
my motion
separately.
is to postpone the reopening for full-time instruction, classroom instruction until January, till spring.
If we stay in
In orange.
in the
Thank you.
orange or red or even yellow. Okay, do I have a second? Oh, you seconded. Sorry, Kathy. All right, we have a motion by Linda Hovey, a second by Dr. Kaiser. Are we ready to vote? Yes, Eileen.
I have a question. It was one of the questions that Tom initiated with the cost of maintaining that third option if we go back at the semester. Is that something that we want to?
Yeah, let's not go there right now. I think we need to just,
Am I wrong that that's not part of whether or not we include the third option when we come back?
We're not voting on that, though. We're only voting that we'll stay with the AM, PM until the start of spring semester.
And not conditioning anything about how we come back?
no.
Thank you.
We're not going to talk about any of those specifics, because those might be, we're not really sure the full, what that's going to be, I think. Okay.
I just wanted to thank Eileen for that clarification, because what I heard was that if we were in red, we were going to go back full-time. But this motion is purely that we're going to stick with the mode we're in until the beginning of the spring semester. And then I'm
Yes.
happy to vote on that. Thank you.
Yes, that is clear, correct? And Erica, is that clear? Did that come across clearly? I know there was a lot of discussion. That's what the motion is?
I can't hear her.
Oh.
Board Clerk Hovey moved to postpone the transition to full-time in-person classroom instruction until January spring semester if we stay in the orange, red, or yellow tier, seconded by Board Vice President Kaiser.
Okay.
Is
Are
that
we ready
clear?
to vote? All righty, then we'll do a roll call vote. Linda, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Okay.
Robinson, aye.
Kaiser? Griffin, aye.
Lando, aye.
Okay, so that passes. Now we'll tackle the next portion of that regarding reversal backwards to the purple zone.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that if the county moves us back into the purple tier, that we meet to determine whether or not to adjust our in-person versus online status.
Okay. Okay, so go, pass it by me again. No, Eileen, pass it by me again, what you just said.
Okay, that if the county moves us back into purple,
Yes.
that we meet to determine whether or not to adjust our online versus in-person delivery status.
Okay, can I make a friendly amendment to that?
Of course.
Okay, I would suggest that we put in that we would meet at our next meeting, at our next scheduled board meeting, because we're having them every 2 weeks. So whatever that next would be after we get into that zone.
Sure, timing is
And that we also consider the circumstances of the COVID
Right.
increase.
That's part of the intent of my motion, is that we meet and we take a look at what we want to do considering the evidence put in front of us, because the way they're broken down by the county, you can tell. Is it age group? Is it, where are the outbreaks by not only the county, but by town as well? So there's a lot of information there that we can use to dissect.
And consult with public
yeah.
health as well.
Yeah,
Okay, I
that's
just wanted to be
that's
clear and
my
make sure we
intent.
got it all in there.
Absolutely.
All right, yes, Tom.
Thank you. I am not super thrilled with that friendly amendment, I have to say, and here's why. We are trying to, on the one hand, listen to and work with parents who want to get their kids back in as quickly as possible, which means we're going to want to examine that data as quickly as possible. Given that tiers change on a Tuesday and our regular scheduled day is Wednesday, I would rather have an emergency meeting if we have to, and have a meeting immediately on Wednesday after, so that we can then make a decision and provide at least 2 or 3 weeks of lag time after that if we need to implement any changes based on what we get.
Okay, so you would like to basically propose another amendment?
Yes.
Yep.
or a variation.
I would agree with Tom on that. A special meeting or an emergency meeting,
Okay.
I feel is
Okay,
is
so
imperative.
we could say something like if the next regular meeting is within a day or something,
Yeah.
we would go with that. But if it wasn't, in order to deal with the emergent situation, we can call in a special meeting
Yeah,
to decide.
Just to clarify, we would not be able to find out on a Tuesday and then have a meeting on Wednesday. That wouldn't give us enough posting.
Right.
But the following Wednesday, we could if we did not have a board meeting. That would work.
Right, and we can call special meetings, there's,
Doesn't
Yeah.
have to be
That's a
on-
good point.
like 48 hours notice,
Yeah.
there's those restrictions. So whatever that would be, do you accept that friendly?
I'm perfectly okay. Accepting that if the seconder agrees.
Okay, yes, all right.
So
that's,
something like a meeting within 7 days of finding out, 7 days of the county tier change?
yes,
Okay.
okay. All right, so Erica, did you get that last?
Could she read it, please? I can't hear her.
Okay, so let me just summarize as best as I can from what I understand. Eileen, you made a motion, and you wanted for us to have greater discretion with the purple, if we revert back to the purple stage, in that we would not automatically go back to online instruction, but that we would hold a meeting within a week, hopefully less. It would either be a regular meeting if that were to occur within that week. If not, we would have a special meeting to discuss the particulars of how those cases arose and what, what situation they actually pose as far as affecting and impacting our ability to have children in school.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I think that we have to be careful. We can't, it gets announced on a Tuesday, we can't have a meeting with that as a topic the next day.
No,
Yeah.
Right, so,
She
okay.
clarified that.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are certain things, we have to do. We have to have 48 hours of notice and this and that. So, okay. All right, so we'll take a vote then, and I'm going to go ahead and take another roll call vote, just to be sure. So, Linda, how do you vote?
Levy, aye.
Robinson?
Robinson, aye.
Kaiser? Griffin, aye.
Lando, aye.
All right, so that passes. Okay, so we got out of that item, and we will.
Just one
Yeah.
second. I need to make sure I learned from my previous stumbles here. So what I didn't hear us say is when we would make the decision if we remained in orange or went to yellow, because we have November and December board meetings coming up. When would those decisions be made? Because we do want to make sure that we give families and staff plenty of notice if that change is made.
Sorry, what is the date of the December board meeting?
December 9th.
9, thank you.
But
So
what
before
we-
the holidays.
Yeah, but what we said is we weren't going to do the change until the January semester start, but we would need planning time. That's what you're saying.
Well, I think the board would need to make that decision, make that public, that we're making that starting in January, we would be going, if we remain, unless you've already made that decision and I missed that.
Well, the only meeting that we would have that's scheduled would be the 9th to decide that. And, so it would have to be a special meeting, that a special meeting would have to be called if it wasn't in the area of that, the 9th, the meeting of the 9th. So,
Madam President, if I might?
Sure.
I think the question that the superintendent has asked us is regarding what to do if we stay in the red, orange, or yellow.
Right.
And making that decision to go back to full, or to go to full in-person with the January restart of school, which would be January 4th. The 9th should give us plenty, because it gives us one full working week and then the 2 weeks of vacation for winter break, and then returning on the 4th. Ugh.
yeah, but it would enable parents to know before the break.
Yes.
And
If we
that
do
would
it the
be,
9th.
and teachers. that would enable everybody to know. So
Right.
I would suggest that we set
Place that on the December 9th
on the
agenda.
December 9th meeting,
Okay.
that we revisit this, it come back on, and that it be discussed again, based
Yeah.
on the circumstances that we're facing at the time.
Okay, I just
And
wanted to be
that's
clear
our-
on the timing for the decision, so thank you for
Right,
that
yeah, you-
clarification.
Yeah,
And that's our reorganization meeting as well, December 9th.
correct.
Right.
Okay. That
Okay,
works.
so we settled on all that? We're good with that?
Think so.
Okay, that took a long time. All right, so now we're going on to discussion action, K-6 online curriculum. Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, thank you. We just want to bring forward to you tonight for your consideration, Oak Ridge, looking at more formal adoption of a curriculum that they're using with their elementary portion of it. So just a couple reminders, Oak Ridge Elementary went from about 15 students a year ago at this time, using a very old school packet kind of structure with things like that, to swelling up to about 300 students. I think there's 275 to 300 in there currently as we speak. And we also heard from a lot of parents that they were looking for a much more flexible option also, as far as like being able to do the work when it kind of matched up to family times, schedules, desires, with all those kinds of things. So we piloted, we did a little trial run with Acellus as a program. We had heard some good things about it from neighboring districts, and as we kind of used it and staff went through it, we saw some holes and issues that we were not comfortable with. With that being said, we went out and looked at Edgenuity, the elementary version of it, and kind of just saw that as a much better option. And Rhonda Odlum is here with us right now also, and I'm going to let Rhonda share a little bit more with that, but her staff has been looking through it and kind of giving, has some thoughts to share with it, and positive thoughts about it also.
Great,
So Rhonda,
thank
are you
you.
on there?
Yes, I am. Hi, Rhonda Odlum here. Thanks for having me. So we've been using PathBlazer for about 6 weeks now, and we found great success with it. The teachers are able to provide standards-based lessons out to their students in English and language arts, math, social science, and science. We are supplementing also with iReady Mystery Science and Studies Weekly. So we're using some of the same online formats that Chico Unified is using, but we really found that families are really happy with these programs and how we've implemented it because of that flexibility. Being stuck in Zoom for a specific period of time at the comprehensive sites just was not working for some families. And we've pretty much stayed with consistent numbers, as you saw earlier tonight, over the last few months. So people are happy with the implementation overall. Any questions about PathBlazer online?
So you have,
And when Rhonda's talking about PathBlazer, that's the Edgenuity elementary version
right,
also.
right. So thus far, though, you've only had a few weeks with this, did you say? 6 weeks. Okay, and overall, the response, have you had any complaints? No?
Nope.
Okay.
Other than the initial, like the first few weeks, just as probably all of Chico Unified experienced with just learning a new program. But once everybody got comfortable, just learning a new program, a new format, how to log in, where to find stuff, then everybody's been very happy with it.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, thank you.
So we just look for your approval to move ahead and formalize that.
I would like to move the passage of the PathBlazer as our elementary Oak Ridge curriculum.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion by Dr. Kaiser, a second by Tom Lando. All those, are there any further questions or items to discuss? Any discussion about this? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so great,
Aye.
that passes. Thank you, that was a little delayed.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Yes, thank you, Rhonda. All right, so next up is our discussion action on and extracurricular expectations for in-season and off-season athletic practices, correct?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. So just to walk the board back to last summer, you did approve the voluntary participation of our students during the summer in activities through the end of July. However, obviously things have changed. And since that time, we've been online, and so students have not been participating in person in and extracurricular activities. So we did draft a list of expectations that we could implement based on board decision. These have changed in the with the understanding that these are expectations. They are no longer guidelines. These would be expected of every event. And I would just like to walk you through the packet that I've provided each of you and is also online. So the first page is, as I said, the expectations. We would have each coach verify that he or she understands what we expect students to do. On the back page is a liability waiver. It's the same waiver that you approved over the summer. I thought it was important tonight to walk quickly the board through the guidance that would support a decision if the board made it tonight or whenever to adopt these reopening expectations. So if you turn to page 4, and again, this is the COVID-19 industry guidance from the California Department of Public Health. So on page 4, I've highlighted for you specifically the language that we're not discussing tonight. We're not talking about competition. We're not talking about sporting events. We're only talking about conditioning. So I just want to be really clear. On page 5, you'll see that there's a connection between a decision that the board could make to guidance from the Butte County Public Health, also to the California Department of Public Health. So I'm going to continue working you through the packet. On page 6 is the beginning of specific guidance for youth sports. And on page 7, you'll see the same language that was contained in the initial packet. So if you continue on to page 9, and I realize I'm moving you quickly through this, but much of it's redundant. On page 9 is a frequently asked question page that's provided by the California Department of Public Health, and the same answer is provided there. So what this really comes down to is the California Department of Public Health ties the recommendation to the county tiers. And as you can see, according to the California Department of Public Health, tying the decision to gyms and fitness centers, when I initially put this together, we were still in the red. So if we decided to move forward with this in orange, we could have students in drills and conditioning only, again, not competitions. They could be participating indoors with modifications at a maximum of 25%. I thought it was also important for the board, just for reference, to see the start dates of the Eastern Athletic League sports, and specifically the Chico and PV athletic teams. I have highlighted each of the Chico Unified team start dates because they are different from other leagues. We had the opportunity to separate ourselves from other schools in our league to pursue state championships. And so the schools made those decisions as part of their league discussions. So every highlighted listing on pages 11 and 12 relate to our Chico Unified sports. So I'm open for any questions. Dr. Kaiser?
Yeah, so, okay, it was easy on the first couple pages because it was big. So cross-country would have a competition date of December 28th. Am I reading that right?
Correct.
Okay, good, now I got it. So the other aspect of, and then the flip of this is field hockey, you say revised, but then you say December the 28th and January 31st, and you highlighted those dates. Because it was revised?
Yes, it was revised. The original calendar came out from the section, and it had different dates on there.
Right, okay.
So I apologize. The highlighting for December 28th and January 31st is a section document.
Okay, so what we're saying, if I'm clear, what we're saying right now is the teams can start conditioning, there's no competition, and does that mean that for competition to start, we have to be in orange or yellow?
The conditions would be up to the original documents, yes. And just be really clear too, the CIF has not distributed guidance yet for competition.
Okay.
They don't govern practices necessarily, but they haven't distributed guidance for competition.
For competition, okay.
Right. Other than if we were in play, you could see the state championship calendar here.
Right. I've just been struck by how significantly different some of the sports have, professional or college, have handled being able to compete and kept their testing cases really low, and other sports appear to, like, kind of fall off the edge of the table. So, all right, thank you. That really helps.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, Kelly?
So I want to clarify here that this being in orange or yellow, for that matter, would be actually based off the county, not tied to our instructional methods.
Correct.
Right.
So let me get the pages correct
Because
here.
it is all volunteer.
Correct. So if you look at
Right.
page 10, that's the guiding document.
Because we had talked about the other side of this, I wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, this is going to require a motion. Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Dr. Kaiser, second by Tom Lando. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, passes unanimously. Next we have information from Mr. Sullivan on the waiver program.
Hopefully a very short update. Just at the last meeting, we said we would come back again with any information on waivers, and actually we have none, which totally makes sense because as we looked at things with the conditions unfolding towards red tier status, it actually was a lot faster and more streamlined of a process for us to get students back in person, kind of following the direction of us moving into that red tier status. We had negotiated all the prospects with that. I believe the county is not even looking at waivers as we speak also. So all things being said and done, it was just a much faster, more appropriate path to kind of come back via that red tier status. So we're just totally on hold. Everybody kind of put all their energies towards coming back in that red tier status, and that's where it is right now. It's not happening because we're in red tier status.
Okay, and anything that they have put together?
The cohorts actually just kind of rolled right in though,
We'll
too.
just
Several of
hold.
the schools, I think there are a couple TKs that rolled in with less than 14 students, and they've just rolled in kind of that red tier status also. Some of the support and RTI groups that are happening, they're all continuing to happen also. So anything that happened via a cohort, the small groups, those are just kind of continuing to happen right now also.
Oh, great, great. Okay, Eileen, did you have a question? Oh, no, you were just, okay. Okay, I thought you were motioning. All righty. Okay, so that was just information. Next up is business services, and it is information about our transportation department.
Yes, we want to update the board because there's certainly a challenge that we're facing currently, and I think we'll face the rest of this school year related to transportation. So we have 7 slides. We'll go through these quickly. But as a reminder, our normal process is that when we start school, we don't have transportation set up for home to school perfectly on day one. Typically, we are scheduling our special education students, our homeless foster youth students, which we are legally required to provide services to, and we are accepting applications for home to school. And we even prioritize those based on the distance from their school that we're trying to transport. So I already mentioned, we also then give priority to our free and reduced qualified students as well, before we actually start allowing students on our buses that are paying for home to school transportation as well. Even in a perfect year, we have limited capacity in our program. We have limited capacity because of the number of drivers that we're able to hire, and we have limited capacity just based on the number of buses that we have. And just as a point, we will always be changing routes, and that's happening daily at the beginning of the school year as we receive new applications, as we have new IPs that are being generated through special education. So it is very normal for our transportation services and routes to be in flux for a number of the first few weeks before school starts. So the next slide is just kind of a snapshot of the number of drivers that we have and the number of buses that we have and the students that we provide services to. And as a comparison, we're looking at 2019-20 compared to where we are right now. In 2019-20, these are averages, and they were only averaged over 3 quarters because we didn't have a 4th quarter at the end of last year. But over the 3 quarters, our type 1 is our home to school transportation, the larger buses. Our type 2 are our special needs students. And then we do have some vans and then our substitute drivers. And you can see at the average last year is we had 28 drivers available, and on average we were transporting about 987 students. And of those, free and reduced represents 350, our homeless 33, and our special education 302. So that brings us to the current year, 2021, and you'll see right away, I'm just going to cut down to the bottom line on the number of drivers. We're down to 19 drivers right now. Some of them are on leave. Average age of our drivers is older, and there's some concerns with COVID. And you can see by the number of students that we're transporting, there is definitely that focus on special education. That currently we're already transporting 247 students, again, compared to last year at that 302. So you can see those ramp up more quickly. And then we have the free, reduced, homeless, and then the special ed numbers. So we're still developing those applications for our students that fall into those categories as well. So just an update on where we are now under an AM/PM model. Currently, we're operating 14 AM routes, 17 midday routes, and 13 PM routes. And that's really due to bell schedule times and an attempt to reduce the number of students on a campus as they're coming in to the school itself. And this is one of our biggest challenges is our buses are cut in half related to their capacity. And even then, we're not able to meet 6-foot social distancing. We measured it out, and we're able to maintain maybe 3 feet, but we are requiring masks, and we are going to keep the windows down to the greatest extent possible related to the weather. But you can see, based on a drastic reduction in the number of drivers and the capacity on our buses being cut in half, we are going to have some challenges. So as a reminder, by law, we're required to provide transportation to special needs students and our homeless students. And we're still receiving those requests even today. Our goal then would be, once we have those, is to send out an all-call or another communication that would go out to our parents and community and start accepting applications for home to school. Our priority really is going to be able to try and meet our legal requirements and provide transportation for those students that are almost outside of the city boundaries. We really do not have the capacity, we don't think at this point in time, to provide a lot of transportation as we've done previously in town. And we provided those board policies and administrative regs for you as well. So also as a point, we provide other transportation services that are going to be impacted, field trips and athletic events. And I list them, the different requirements for drivers related to the number of hours they can drive and the amount of time they have to be off before they can drive. And then historically, our practice has been to keep 2 large buses really earmarked for each of our 2 high schools that they can use to use for extracurricular athletics, certainly the bulk of that, but maybe band or something else. Our transportation fees, just as a reminder, once we get down to that priority level, we do charge for services for those that don't meet those qualifications of free and reduced. And you can see it's not a lot of money that the district receives because, quite frankly, we don't have the capacity to take on a lot of those students. And I list the amounts that are in there and that we currently are charging. But kind of the last piece here in our next steps is that for the current year, 2021, we do intend to provide some additional communication and regarding parents, regarding transportation and accepting applications. We need to finalize our driver trainer. We've had a person on staff who has been ready and completed all their testing behind the wheel, but they have to schedule a time with California Highway Patrol. And due to COVID, they're not accepting and setting those times. So we are hiring somebody outside and under contract to keep our drivers in compliance, but we don't have our driver trainer trained in-house to be able to get that done even on a more regular basis. which is the challenge again of going out and recruiting more drivers and getting them through that process. So it's not like we're just accepting we're down from 29 to 19, throwing up our hands, but our options for getting new people recruited and in the system are limited.
And it was partly CHP too.
And it is partially CHP, just not being able to schedule that time for our driver trainer to complete that certification. We're going to continue to accept our home to school applications, and we'll continue to adjust routes as required. And again, I already mentioned that goal of trying to meet our legal requirements and transport those students that are the furthest away from their schools. But again, I just can't emphasize this enough. This program is already constrained, and every year at the beginning of school, we are always making a few people unhappy because we just can't provide the service. That is more impacted this year, and we will have more people that we're going to have to talk to them about not being able to provide transportation services home to school, which then also leads into some difficult conversations about athletics and extracurricular and field trips. We're going to do our best to provide as much service as we can, but I want the board to be aware of our challenge. We'll continue to try and recruit drivers. My last point, when we first were working in transportation maybe 7 years ago, we identified 4 areas that we needed to work on. One was pay, one was their work environment, 2 was the quality of the buses that they were driving. I had a 4th, but I can't remember it offhand. But we've addressed all those. We have increased the hourly rate. We've done a really nice job with our bus fleet for home to school especially. There's work to do on our type 2 buses. I would tell the board that, but our type 1s are much better. And we even put out a new office space for our transportation department out in the courtyard. So we've tried to address those areas of concern. But it is a challenge. It's a tough job. It's a split shift, and it's an important work. So we'll continue to try and recruit, but I wanted the board to be aware of this and wanted this to start getting out in our community.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
So since we just went through the information that John provided, you wouldn't need these buses, the 2 big buses for athletics until December, late December.
That's correct. It gives us some time to plan, but I will tell you, we have really good athletic directors who are already scheduling and wanting answers, and we're not quite able to do that yet. So that's just one of, again, the challenges we're faced with.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay, so that was information only. Thank you for that. Next up is discussion action for Julie Kissel. Is Julie available?
Yep.
Julie, are you available?
I can't hear her.
No, neither can we.
Say something. Still can't hear you.
So Julie is trying to call in. So if we can just be patient, we don't have her. Nobody can hear her quite yet.
Okay.
How about we go to the next item and then come back to this?
Okay. Julie, if you can hear us, we will come back to you momentarily.
I can also call her from here if we need to.
You know, I'm happy to take on, Julie does have a couple of items, but then I have facility use, and I could take that on now under item 5.
Yeah, why don't we move to 5 until we can connect up with Julie?
Okay.
If nobody objects?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
So under facility use, we note that while we're in red, that we're going to start receiving requests for outside groups to start renting our facilities. And so we want to have this conversation with the board, and we do ask for really kind of 4 things from the board this evening, and I'll go over those in a moment. But just to let you know, we've had conversations with our principals, our high school principals specifically, and athletic departments, and they are going to be severely challenged over the next few weeks just to deal with all of the events that are now going to be crushed into a shorter period of the school year. So we think it's important that even looking at the administrative regs for facility use, it has a priority listing, and events that are specific to our schools get the highest priority. And if you start having all of your winter sports and fall sports and spring sports really coming into the school year at the same time, and the planning that's occurring now, we really just don't think we're going to be able to open up to outside groups, especially when we start scheduling, because we need those facilities to be open and available through the next few weeks to be flexible related to what we're going to find out, hopefully, as we move forward and what the tiers may be. So the other challenge we have is related to cleaning.
Yeah.
With kind of the higher expectation of sanitation and cleaning, for us to open up our facility to outside groups that would bring into our spaces, we would have to have, again, additional staff working more overtime to do the disinfecting and sanitization that would be really required for our teachers, I think, and our staff to feel safe. So I actually have 4 specific things that we're asking the board to do. I'll pull those up. We're asking that the board would consider following, again, the county tier assignments for gatherings for indoor activities, and we provided you a summary of what those look like from the county, so that's specific to indoor events. We do actually ask that the board would allow for public use of our outdoor spaces on our schools after school hours, beginning at 3:30 p.m. until dark, and then also on the weekends. And again, those would be outdoor spaces where a family may want to use kick a ball or something like that. So we do suggest that those be open during those time periods. But number 3 would be, do not schedule any of our CUSD facilities to any outside organizations until January 1st or the beginning of the spring semester. Really almost consistent to what you've done related to the AM/PM model. 3:30 to dark, because often our custodians who are on site go out and lock the gates when it becomes dark.
Now, would they have to be, the use of these outdoor spaces, would they have to be compliant with the face shields or masks?
They would.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really more of a, this is really not organized groups coming on. This
Right.
is your public who may go for a walk or something like that.
Yeah. I drove by Emma Wilson, and I don't know if that was, it's the park, I think, that's right next to
Right.
them.
It is.
Right.
And there were, a bunch of, say, junior high school boys playing basketball. None of them were masked up or anything, and I thought, wow, this is really a great opportunity to,
Yeah, it's not school.
yeah. I mean, I know those kids are really anxious to get out there and play and do those things, but it seemed like that might be a real contagious situation there.
Sure. And certainly, the board can consider that. It was just really an attempt to,
Yeah,
it's a
but I mean,
public
if we're
facility.
gonna,
and- yeah.
if we're gonna require people to, based on what the level is of danger, that they have to respond appropriately, wear masks if necessary, whatever, then I think that's a good thing, that,
Okay,
certainly.
And then the last one is actually increasing our fee for outside organizations when we do open up to cover the additional cleaning. And so we included an update to the fee structure to add hourly rates really for the increased custodial time that we'll need to provide to make sure that those areas are sanitized and clean. I would say administratively, depending on what the board did this evening, we would start taking applications. I would suggest at the beginning of November and have conversations with our outside groups to start that conversation, to give them hope. And they need to plan, quite frankly, as they're scheduling their own seasons or practices or events as well. So with that, I turn it over to the board.
Okay, this is an item we have to vote on. Do you have any questions for Kevin?
I do not.
I will move the passage of item 2.5.
Yes, that's 8.2.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
.5, I guess. All right. So that was a motion by Dr. Kaiser, a second by Eileen Robinson. Any other discussion? All righty. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes, and that was a 4-component process that Mr. Bultema laid out.
So Julie Kissel is
Julie's on?
available by phone.
Okay, Julie, are you there now?
Okay, Julie.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Are you hearing me through John's phone or through the computer?
I don't know. But we're hearing you.
But we can hear you.
Okay, I think you can still hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Fantastic. I apologize for the delay. Let's go ahead and get rolling. Charter Schools Measure K Facility Committee have been very busy. They brought forth 3 recommendations for the board's review. They are for Chico Country Day and Inspire School of Arts and Sciences. The first one for Chico Country Day is an additional $100,000 for the contingency fund for their current construction project. Unfortunately, they have run into some significant underground conflicts with the digging of the footings for their new building. I'm happy to say that we've gotten through them, but they were quite costly. So they need an additional $100,000 to be put into their contingency fund. And then the 2 items for Inspire, one is for additional planning funds for the architect. They initially asked for about $500,000 to get going with their planning and programming, of which already they have accomplished that portion. And now they are ready to continue on with Rainforth Grau Architects, and they're requesting additional $500,000 that will get them all the way through design, review and approval by the Division of the State Architects, and all the way through the construction of the project. Additionally, they are asking for $200,000 more for consultants that are going to be required to assist them in the design process and to assist them in getting through the planning and programming as it continues. So those are the 3 things we're asking for you to review and approve this evening.
Okay, any questions for Julie? All right, if not, this is an action item.
So I will move the passing of the Charter Schools Measure K projects, Chico Country Day and Inspire.
I'll second.
Oh, okay.
And actually, I do have a question. I'm sorry that it took me so
Okay,
long to buzz in.
Sure. Go ahead, Tom.
Julie, can you tell me a little bit more about what the consultants that are required for the Inspire project?
Yes. As you know, or you may not know, Mike Weisenborn was working with all of the charter schools as a facilities mentor, and he has since retired again. And so that has left Inspire with a need for, kind of a facilities person to inform them as they go in through the design process, which will be very helpful for them. I do not believe that they will spend all of the $200,000, but that's what they're asking for at this point, is the leeway to do that. In addition, it's the consultants for helping them with the charter school funding. It is quite complicated and not something that the district is super familiar with, since we're not a charter school. So they will be utilizing the services of King and Associates to help them get through the funding side of the project.
And your recommendation is that we move forward with this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second. Are we ready to vote, everyone now? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. Next up has to do with Pleasant Valley High School career technical projects.
Yes, thank you. The Chico Unified Board of Education approved career and technical education grant applications for Pleasant Valley High School almost 2 years ago. And initially, the statewide funding allocation wasn't at a high enough level to cover these projects. But with the state supporting more funding for CTE, they've now been approved at the State Allocation Board. And this is very, very good news for our district and for PV High School. Many, many thanks to the staff members that took the time to write those grants, and Liz Metzger for her leadership, and Priscilla Burns for her leadership. I already provided to you the programming and planning booklets that describe the 4 projects. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on those. I don't want to take up your time in describing them again to you. If you feel clear, we'll move ahead. If you have questions, please let me know. I did want to mention 2 really key pieces of information. All 4 of these projects aim to provide accommodations for our special needs students in these CTE programs, and that is really critical. And as always, the district is attempting to, applying to leverage these CTE funds with any other available dollars that we can get our hands on. The 3 buildings that these projects will impact are slated for modernization down the road. So we would hope to marry state modernization dollars along with these CTE grant dollars to get more work done than just simply the interiors of the classrooms for the CTE. And by that, I mean putting on new roofs, upgrading the power, putting in new ceilings where needed, adding data and media tools like the ViewSonics, which we already did campus-wide, and new HVAC equipment for those buildings. The value of the modernization funding ability, it hasn't been determined yet. So on your lead sheet that I provided, you see a TBD. So we will apply for every project and every bit of money we can get our hands on, but you should know that it will offset a project in the future because it will be a couple, if not several years before we actually realize the benefit of those applications. I'll open it up for questions, but tonight I just want to reiterate, we're asking for approval for all 4 of these CTE projects and approval to enter contract with Rainforest Grau Architects from the design process all the way through construction. Thank you.
Okay, I see a couple, excuse me, I see a couple questions. Kathy?
Well, I had the chance to go onto PV's campus when I guess the PM kids were coming on, and the amount of construction that's going on right now is quite awesome. It's really amazing. But as a member of the facilities committee, we've gone through this, as you noted, a number of times, and I'm extremely impressed with the projects, and I certainly would move to approve this once everybody else gets their questions answered.
Okay, Eileen?
Oh, thank you. I remember when we didn't quite make it in on these projects when they were first submitted the first time around. And one of the things that is just so exciting is the employability of students coming out of these projects. These are career paths that are earning the students jobs before they even get graduated out of high school. These are fields that employers cannot fill, and the wages and benefits of these career paths are absolutely marvelous. And so I'm just so excited that Chico Unified is going to have the buildings that will allow us to provide these CTE courses. It's just so exciting.
Okay, any other questions? All right.
No, just one comment. The PV school was included in phase 4 of the facilities master plan, which was part of the Measure K, which was communicated to the public. And I just think it's very important that we continue to keep our promise based on what we said we were going to do. We are increasing the scope, but we're also leveraging these additional CTE dollars, which I think are the right thing. So I just want to point that out. this project was already in phase 4. We're just increasing the scope, certainly within all the language within Measure K.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so Kathy, I believe you made a motion.
I did. I want to move 2.3, the Pleasant Valley CTE projects.
Okay, second by Eileen Robinson. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that passes unanimously. Next up, bid approval for Pleasant Valley High School tennis courts project.
Thank you. So this project was brought forward by Mr. Bultema many months ago as one of the prioritized athletic projects for the high schools. And it just bid today at 2 p.m. And the lowest responsive bidder is Santos Excavating at $220,000. And so I'm asking for your approval to move forward with this project tonight for the amount of $235,000. That's a contingency added on that will help us to pay for the nets that the district will be providing and the windscreens on the fence that the district will be providing as well.
Okay, any other questions? Can I have a motion?
I will move the 8.2.4, the Pleasant Valley High School tennis courts project.
Sure, I'll second this one.
Okay, wanted to give you a chance. Okay, motion by Dr. Kaiser, second by Tom Lando. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, unanimously, it passes. All right, next up is going to be, thank you, Julie. Next up is going to be a discussion action item on the GAN appropriations limit, and that will be Jacqueline Kruger.
Good evening, Board. This is
Hello.
the most stimulating topic all night. So in front of you is the GAN appropriations limit. It basically was established in 1979 and is at this point kind of a pro forma calculation that is done as part of our unaudited actuals. So I'm here tonight to ask for your approval on this form, barring any questions.
Okay, any questions for Jacqueline?
Nope. I'd like to move approval.
Okay. All right, we have a motion by Linda Hovey, a second by Dr. Kaiser. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right. Okay,
Jacqueline
that
takes the
passes.
record for speed tonight. Man.
All right, next is 2019-20 unaudited actuals, financial statements.
Yes, so this evening, Marie Hartman and myself will be presenting the 1920 unaudited actuals. And there is a presentation, if that can be brought up, please.
This was such a great surprise to see this. Made me happy.
A little short. Okay, the unaudited actuals report represents actual revenues and expenditures for the fiscal year. This isn't a budget. It's really how we ended up at the end of June 30th, 2020. These numbers are presented before our annual audit is complete, so these numbers could potentially change. The auditors were on site the week of October 5th, and we will bring the audit back to you in January. Next slide, please. All right, this is our graph of the ADA trends over the last 5 years. You can see we have been in the position of increasing enrollment and then thus increasing ADA. This will not be the case in 2021, but as we discussed earlier in the board meeting, 2021 and that following 21-22 will be based on 1920 ADA. Next slide. This is a graph representing our total revenue. So it's just goes to show that that ADA number drives the local control funding formula, which is 75% of our 150 million budget, which is about 113 million. So that is a big factor in our funding. Next slide.
Okay, so this is our, very baseline income statement. We're gonna show you a little bit more in depth later on. But if you look at the far right column, our total revenue is 150 million, expenditures 148, and transfers and contributions were net 2. So we ended up at a positive change in fund balance of 4.2 million. This is a more positive change in fund balance than you guys are used to seeing from us. There's a few factors at play. It was an unusual year. We have some other slides that'll explain kind of what happened. Next slide, thanks. Okay, you guys are used to seeing this graph. This is where we spend our money. Salaries and benefits, combined unrestricted and restricted, are 86% of our total expenses, which is not unusual. Our employees are our main cost. Next slide. When you add in the contribution to special education, that number goes up to 90% of unrestricted expenses. So you can see that all the other little things, services, books and supplies, they make up a really small amount of our total budget. All right, next slide. Part of our, when we go through SACs for our year-end close, we have to meet a calculation that we are required to spend at least 55% on classroom expenses. This is defined by teachers and instructional aides and their benefits. So we are at 63.18 in 1920, so we well exceeded this requirement.
And I will say some school districts struggle to meet that percentage, quite frankly. So I do believe it shows that we're spending money in the classroom and directly on kids.
That's a great point. Thanks, Kevin. So in front of you here is our estimated actuals of what we thought we were going to end the year with, and the UA, or unaudited actuals, of how we actually ended. So on the unrestricted sides, let me preface that. So the change was 3.6 million, better than we anticipated at the end of June. And that is pretty evenly distributed between 1.8 million in revenue and 1.8 million in expenditures. So I will go through the detail on that. So if you go to the next slide, please. The large change in revenue was related to our ADA with our local control funding formula. So we have the ability, after we submit our P2 ADA, to go back and do what's called a calendar shift, which is either to include or exclude the 2 weeks at Christmas. And by doing that, we were able to capture an additional 50 ADA. So that came in at the very end of the year in working with our attendance folks. Wow. The other piece that largely drove revenue was a quote-unquote revenue entry, which is the fair market value of cash, which essentially says if we were to liquidate all of our money at county treasury, there'd be $428,000 greater than the actual cash value because of the investments that the county takes with our cash into treasuries. So it's not really a revenue, but it is a required entry for accounting purposes. On the non-people side, so the books and supplies and the services, what we found was because we closed school at spring break, right after spring break, we had very large site carryover from our sites, as well as reduced travel for our teachers and staff, and our utilities ended up being over budget. So what we saw was the impact of a lot of one-time savings related to shutting down right after spring break through the end of June. The other piece on the net of transfers and contributions, we got about $250,000 more in our RDA account, Fund 41, the reinvestment or redevelopment agency fund. So that did help us by about $250,000. So the next slide here is one that the board has requested in the past of what makes up our contributions to the restricted programs. So largely of the 19.9 million, almost 7 million goes to our special ed program. So just to put it in perspective, our special ed program this last year was $27.5 million. So the contribution from the general fund is 61%. The additional dollars that come from the unrestricted side to the restricted side is our routine restricted maintenance, and that's 3% of our general fund expenditures. So that's 4.4 million for last year. And then the other, which has this weird negative value of 1.2 million, that is the district's share of MAW dollars that we have been sitting on the restricted side of the budget because we thought there was this outstanding liability related to our MAW claims, the feds going back and auditing. We have subsequently determined that that liability is no longer there, so the district is taking our portion back and putting it on the unrestricted side. Because the other dollars for the staff portion of MAW have already been distributed to employees, so we weren't gonna ask for that money back, so the district put their money on the restricted side as a potential liability payment. Transfers in from other funds, there's about 100,000 that come in for developer fees. So that's one area that has not slowed down in our office. We are continuing to get developers coming in, pulling permits and paying fees. And again, like I alluded to earlier, 3.2 million from the redevelopment agency pass-through fund comes through, and that covers a good chunk of that 4.4 million that goes to routine restricted. So really, you're looking at about $1.2 million of unrestricted dollars that are helping to fully fund our maintenance department.
And those dollars will go away when the debt is absolved within the former redevelopment agency. So for Chico Unified, we have to look out to 2037, we think is the date. But there's a large challenge within this budget of how we're funding our RMA, our routine restricted maintenance, that will go away in around 2037. So that's for future boards and people to decide, but we're trying to keep that information available so they'll know what they're getting into.
All right, next slide, please. So the other piece that we want to show you is our unrestricted ending fund balance. So we did surplus a significant amount this year related to the one-time savings for COVID. So you can see that in the kind of periwinkle color of the unassigned ending fund balance. Next slide, please. So we do primarily speak about the unrestricted side because we have a lot of flexibility with those dollars, but we do want to bring up the restricted side of the fund balance, of the budget, I'm sorry. Of our actuals. So these are kind of the main programs listed in front of you of programs that still have dollars remaining in them. A couple large ones that stand out are lottery. I will say our Ed Services team has a very strategic plan with how they are doing textbook adoptions and purchasing textbooks on an ongoing basis related to the Williams Act. So while $787,000 may seem like a lot, in May of this last year, the board did approve the K-8 science adoption for Amplify. That alone was $1 million. So this carryover and then part of the current year allocation will be totally gone related to that adoption. Another large component we have here is the low-performing student block grant. Sites were allocated dollars to help low-performing students at those school sites, and I'm aware that most of those schools have plans, and that $600,000 will be spent by June, which is what we're required to spend, otherwise we send it back to the state. So it's been a little bit of a challenge with COVID, but site administrators are very aware that those dollars are there to be used to help those students. So we always talk about cash is king, which is really important. We need cash in order to make payroll, but I would say more than any other year, at least since I've been at Chico Unified, is this year talking about cash. So you can see on the graph in front of you, we have 18-19 numbers, we have 19-20, they're pretty similar. And the dashed line is our prediction for the current year. And you can see it pretty much follows the other 2 years until we get to February. So February is when the state deferrals come in. And you can see that they are deferring part of our payments February, March, April, May, and June. It's basically a rainbow at this point. So February will be paid back in November. March will be paid back in October. April will be paid back in September, et cetera, right? So June will be paid back in July. So it's kind of the opposite of what we think how they would be paid back. So we are actively watching cash on a monthly basis, if not bi-weekly basis. At this point in time, we are not anticipating having to get a cash loan before June. For the school district, it would be through a TRANS, a tax revenue anticipation note. In projecting out a 24-month cash flow, which is best practice, given the cash position that the state has put us in, we are potentially looking at next summer for a cash loan. But I will certainly keep the board posted and updated on that.
Jacqueline, excuse me, did I hear you say the deferrals are crossing fiscal years?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So we actually had one this last year, our June 2020 payment we received in the middle of July, but it was only 1 month, and so
Right.
we were able to bear
Right.
that. Now we're talking about 5 months, partial payments of 5 months being deferred into another fiscal year.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh. Thank you.
So just in wrapping up, the big takeaway, obviously, that we've talked about all night is COVID. So school closures in March led us to less spending at our school sites. We had savings in subs. We had savings in transportation. So we ended up with a much better bottom line than we anticipated. Now, I will say in the current year, we have Federal CARES Act dollars that have really helped us get the online learning going. But as we're all finding, it's been very expensive. And there's been a lot of things that have crept up that we didn't realize were going to be costs associated. So I feel pretty confident in having this nice fund balance as we can move forward with transitioning out of online learning into an AMP model and hopefully a traditional model at some point this year. And lastly, I would just say what was kind of alluded to earlier, the tax dollars that were received in 2019 is what drove the state budget for the current year, which means that the tax dollars received in 2020, calendar year 2020, will drive the school budget for 21-22. And during many months in 2020, we had extremely high unemployment. And so there is concern on the state economy side that there'll be less tax revenue. So we are anxiously awaiting the governor's proposal in January to see what, if any, reductions will be made to schools. And then lastly, obviously, locally, we're going to be looking at enrollment pretty closely. We are going to be funded on 1920, but as we prepare our first interim, which we're working on right now, is the first time we're updating our budget, we do have to look forward to the next 2 years. And what does that enrollment look like? And how do we project that out? So that's kind of where we ended for 1920. If there's any questions, we can certainly address those.
Yeah, Kathy?
So I had written myself this question on the on the attendance data, and I think it's probably a question that a lot of people would be asking, like, where do we think those students went in this past year? But I guess the other side of it is, do we have visions, I don't know, snowflakes dancing on our dreams about how we might get more students back?
Well, I do know that Tim Karras has been monitoring when students have left and where they're going. I don't have any specifics on that. I don't know if Kelly or Jay can speak to that.
We just had this conversation with him, and we are seeing a lot leave the area and leave the state. But we can certainly do a more specific update on that at our next board meeting, if that's the desire of the board.
Yeah, we've had Tim Karras and his team has been calling and tracking down. A lot of them have left our state and left our city. Normally, in the past, we've had shifts to charter schools, but mostly people have been leaving town and leaving state. So we'll have that breakdown for you. We've had that from Tim before.
You know, and if I could jump in, a really good analysis for the board is to think if we lose 300 kids at roughly, let's just say $10,000 a kid, we're down $3 million. Linda kind of mentioned that dollars before. But then let's talk about reductions that we'd have to make. Because we have 300 less students, we would have 10 less teachers on average, right? 30 kids, let's say, per teacher. Right. Well, that's only roughly with benefits $1 million. So we're losing $3 million in revenue, and just in the direct instruction costs that we could potentially cut would be $1 million. So what happens to that $2 million that we have to decide? That's in the support dollars. That's not an easy cut to start making. It's a perfect example of how when you're in a declining enrollment, it is very, very difficult to make the cuts you need to make as fast as you need to make them.
Going to be some challenging times ahead, but the unaudited actuals look great. It gives us a little cushion, and I'm grateful to the staff. Thank you.
Yeah, Eileen?
Yes, the decline in enrollment issues from years past. We used consultants and others to try and project what our decline in enrollment was based on birth rates and all of those other issues. Do we have a standing process for doing that every year, or do we need to make a decision to, oh, I guess we better go check that out?
Yeah, just as a clarification, that data that we do every year or those studies that we have done really every year are related to making sure we have capacity to house students. That really is not the same kind of look that we do with budgets, because those budget dollars are 1 year to the next, not what are birth rates, what are the development costs. So we get that question a lot, like, you're projecting increased ADA or increased enrollment over the next 10 years. Well, yes, based on looking at it to make sure we house kids. When you start looking at actual enrollment and ADA, the best you're going to be able to do is look at trend. Well, now drop COVID in the middle of that.
Yeah,
Basically, that
it's
trend analysis is out the door. So we're just going to have good conversations with Ed Services. We're going to have good conversations with really our community, trying to do the best we can to come up with some number. I will tell you, we'll be conservative in that projection, but it will be a real challenge. We've had this conversation for 6 months now about how are we going to project what enrollment's going to look like.
I've been paying attention as you've mentioned the importance of making the cuts before you have to make the cuts, because if you wait, it doubles the amount you have to cut. So that's why I asked the question. I'm a little nervous with what we've heard.
That's Kelly's favorite saying, $1 saved this year is $2 saved next year. So very well, Eileen.
Okay, any more questions about this? Are we ready to take a vote? And do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll move the 2019-20 unaudited actuals financial statements, and thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank
I'll
you,
second.
Jacqueline. And Marie. Marie,
Yes.
you got away without us introducing you and saying. She's hiding back there. Okay, so a motion by Dr. Kaiser, a second by Linda.
Linda.
All
Yep.
right, if we're ready to vote, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 That's unanimous. Thank you very much, Marie
Thank you.
and Jacqueline. And Kevin.
Sorry I missed you, Marie.
They did all the work,
I
literally.
know.
on
I
this
know
one.
they
I
do.
just threw that in there to score extra points.
Oh, and by the way, I'd just like to thank them as well for the new formatting on the accounts payable warrants. That's really helpful. So thank you.
Okay, next up is Mr. Hanlon, it looks like.
Okay, so sadly, we found ourselves needing to hire a new musical theater teacher at Chico High School. And in even the best of times, that's a tough one to fill. There just aren't a lot of musical theater teachers out there. We did find one, Mr. Michael Bone. He is well known here in Chico in the theater, in the circle of the theater groups, but he's not credentialed. So we are coming to you have applied for a provisional internship permit. It's a 1-year permit, basically. And it gets us through the end of this year until we can do a state search for a teacher. But he has gladly stepped forward and has offered to teach our musical theater sections for the remainder of this year. But we need board approval to get the PIP certificate.
Okay, any questions?
I just want to say I appreciate Mr. Bone's willingness to do this. It's tough to fill, and I know the theater community is very close. I know that he is well known and respected and seen as someone who can fill Janice's shoes, and that's important.
Absolutely.
Okay, do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, you want to do that?
Yeah, I'll move that, sure.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Tom Lando, second by Dr. Kaiser. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
So I do have a question. So is our other teacher that we hired or did we move her, that woman over to, from other classes? Because you had two that you,
Yeah, choir, music, the music piece, we did find a credentialed teacher to also, a teacher that is currently teaching at Butte College.
Oh,
She is
good.
going to, because we had to split the positions. It's very difficult to get somebody credentialed in both areas. So we split the positions, and so we have an instructor from Butte College that is credentialed, and will fill in the other position for the remainder of the year.
Okay, the next one is resolution to allow a credentialed teacher to teach any single subject class based on appropriate coursework.
So I bring these to you each year. We have a number of positions where we have teachers that are teaching out of their credentialed area, but they have the amount of coursework required by the state to teach those classes as long as we had board approval. For example, we have a French teacher that teaches a section of Spanish, but has the requisite coursework to teach beginning Spanish. We have a social science teacher at Chico High who's also a football coach, and he's doing the weightlifting, those types of things. So we are once again bringing those to you for approval.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Kaiser, a second by Tom Lando. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Next up, Resolution 1525-20 to allow teachers with a multiple subject credential to teach a specific subject below grade 9.
So when we added the 6th grade to the junior highs, we brought a number of 6th grade teachers over to the junior highs. And while they are teaching, they must teach a certain number of multiple subjects within their credential, but they also can teach a number of, I think up to 2 of English or social science or whatever area we designate for 6th graders. But we need, again, board approval on a year-to-year basis to allow them to teach a single subject credentialed area.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, motion by Dr. Kaiser, second by Linda Hovey. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, our next is going to be items from the floor. I don't see anybody out there, except if any of you folks want to go to the podium and say something. All right, we'll dispense with that. Any further announcements? No? Okay, then we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.